Today was both the Grand Sukimi Festival and the 15th day of the 8th month of the year. Visitors from all over the world as well as locals were packed into Tanzuku-gai's streets. The streets were lined with a variety of entertainment options, such as 7 needle loops, lantern riddle games, and, for the younger crowd, candle stands, apple bobbing, and goldfish scooping. The view was adorned with fully bloomed sakura trees. There was a rather ordinary bar in the center of Tanzaku-gai, a bustling city. Several paintings in the Japanese style were displayed on its dark brown walls. The bar's seating was intended to be circular, giving the impression of a whirlpool from an overhead perspective. The front bar seats were occupied by a variety of people, including young couples, groups of friends, and especially a couple of lifelong friends and comrades. The main bar was situated farthest from the main entrance. The two individuals' solemn faces were out of keeping with the joyous atmosphere of the evening. The woman seated on the left was a stunningly beautiful woman who frequently attracted the attention of many men. This woman had brown eyes, a diamond-shaped mark on her forehead, and blonde hair that was tied in a long ponytail that hung down to her lower hip. Chin-length strands of hair framed both sides of her face. She was around 5 feet 4 and wore a green robe with the kanji word, gamble, printed on it. She had on a white sleeve shirt and black shorts with a matching waist sash underneath her robe. Her enormous breasts, however, were her most noticeable characteristic. It was a man with very distinguished features who sat next to her. A distinctive head protector with the kanji of oil printed across the metallic object on his forehead, red lines running down from his eyes, and waist length. Spicy white hair tied in a ponytail framed both sides of his face. At roughly 6 feet 4, he was a fairly tall man. He wore a long red vest underneath a gray kimono, full-length pants that matched the color of his shirt, and traditional Japanese clogs. When two of the strongest shinobi ever created in the shinobi world were within arm's reach of the bar patrons, they were unaware of it. They were Konoha no Namakuji Tsunade Haim and Jiraiya the Gama Sennin. The Sandaime Hokage had permitted his 2 students to take a short vacation from the village just days after the Third Shinobi World War. Even lifelong veterans like Jiraiya and Tsunade need to quietly repent because the 2 Sannin were among the most formidable shinobi in the war and had countless lives on their hands. A flustered Tsunade half asked, "The Third Great War is finally over. It's hard to believe, isn't it?" "Hi, this is the Second Shinobi World War we've been through," Jiraiya said as he drank his sake. "I know a lot of Leaf shinobi has died in the war, but I am glad that no one particularly close to us have perished." The only reaction Jiraiya received was silence. He knew that he shouldn't have said that to his teammate because she had already lost too much to wars. Tsunade had changed greatly since becoming a genin. The joyful and vivacious girl she had been at that time had long since disappeared, leaving only a shell of herself. The Senju had far more power than she had at the time, but it came at the expense of most of her soul. She no longer possessed the will of fire that her clan prized above all others. When Jiraiya looked around, he saw a lot of happy faces. He knew that most of them were just regular people from all over the world, but even they were happy that the war was finally over. The war had destroyed the world economy over the past 10 years, but now that the violence has stopped, people everywhere can finally breathe a sigh of relief and see a glimmer of hope. As he sipped his sake saucer, the strong Sannin remarked, "The people around him sure look happy. The end of the war could be one of the best things to ever happen to them." The woman said in a flat voice, "Why wouldn't they be? The world is finally at peace and they could make money again." Tsunade nodded absently, her face flushed, having already consumed 3 bottles of sake. As he guided Tsunade to a suitable location for moongazing, Jiraiya sighed and turned to face his teammate. "Let's go join the festival. It is very seldom that we get to see the moon like this," he said. Roof of Tanzuku-gai Castle. As he continued to stare at the full moon, Jiraiya said, "Did you know that in a far-off land in the west, women celebrate this moon as a tribute for the man they love? The men will praise and recite poems for the woman they loved, comparing their beauties to that of the moon." Tsunade ripped her eyes from the moon and turned to face her lifelong teammate. Jiraiya added, "And that was something I always wanted to do? Then why didn't you remember that you're the gallant Jiraiya?" Tsunade smirked in amusement and said, "You ought to have had girls swooning over you after the Second Shinobi World War." Jiraiya's face was softly smiling. Tsunade was taken aback by the man's less than enthusiastic voice as he said, "Yeah. That was the case." The man closed his eyes and let out a long sigh before whispering, "But I never had any sort of feelings for those women. They were all beautiful but they just weren't for me." The Sannin opened his eyes and turned to face Tsunade. "There had always been only one woman in my life, and as long as she is in my heart I could never love another woman." Tsunade's face flushed, partially from the alcohol and partially from Jiraiya's sincere words. Jiraiya. She started. Ignoring his teammate's voice, Jiraiya went on, I met her many years ago, and my feelings for her had started since then. She was a very unique girl. Angry and violent in 1 minute, sweet and loving in another. She was the reason I actually wanted to get hurt or injured on missions back then. Her face and actions during her healing me always made me feel cared and loved. Jiraiya chuckled as he spoke, enjoying his phrases. There was just something about her eyes. They were so full of life and compassion, they made me feel that she could do anything she wanted to do. I was sure that she will be the most successful medical ninja in Konoha, and I was right. Tsunade had always known that her teammate liked her, but she believed that relationship had ended years ago. She was completely absorbed in Jiraiya's words and had no idea how strongly he felt about her. The Senju heiress had never heard Jiraiya talk with such passion. It truly gave the impression that he was a Sannin rather than a mere pervert. Jiraiya turned to face his lifelong sweetheart. The white-haired man knew Tsunade was referring to her when he said, I was very happy that she could be so successful, but over time I watched her get knocked down repeatedly emotionally, and the girl I loved began to change. The light in her eyes started to dim. And she grew distant from me. I didn't know what to do. I tried my best to comfort her, but she always pushed her away. There was nothing I could do. As Tsunade closed her eyes, tears streamed down her cheeks. She felt bad for treating Jiraiya the way she always had. It was as if she had let him down. Jiraiya approached Tsunade cautiously until their faces were just a few inches apart, at which point he placed both of his hands on her shoulders. The woman smiled softly as she heard Jiraiya's vivid recollection of her. The first time I met you was at our team meeting. I still remember that you were wearing that cute turquoise kimono and how you used to tie your hair back in a high ponytail. That was the Tsunade I fell in love with, the happy and fun-loving Senju heiress that liked to fight with me. As she hung on to every word he said, Tsunade began to approach Jiraiya. With a hint of melancholy, the man whispered, I was really happy after I got the contract for the Toads, because I thought I could have impressed you with my power, but that never happened. But I didn't give up. I spent the next few years traveling around the world, and it was some of the most important and happiest time of my life. I got much stronger and wiser through those travels. Said the man as he looked into Tsunade's eyes. The sudden outburst of anger Jiraiya displayed startled Tsunade. But leaving Konoha at the time is the one thing I regret the most in my life, Jiraiya said. It was during the time I was away you started to date Dan. If I was not to leave we might have had a chance. Tsunade mumbled, Jiraiya. With difficulty, she had no idea that Jiraiya would feel that way. Jiraiya looked directly into Tsunade's eyes once more and said, I know that this may not be the best time, but this is something I have to say, with conviction. There is nothing more I can say to express my love for you, Tsunade. I know you may not even consider me that way, Buddha. Tsunade's lips smashed against Jiraiya's, effectively shutting down Jiraiya's brain. Then he felt Tsunade's tongue enter and start exploring his mouth as his eyes widened, knocking him out of his stunned state. Stunned and in denial, Jiraiya slowly returned the kiss, causing both of them to moan in the process. After 5 minutes, the two reluctantly pulled away from each other, a link of saliva connecting their lips. With tears in her eyes and her entire body trembling, the woman whispered, Jiraiya. Don't speak anymore, near her teammate's face. Please, this is enough. Why? Why are you still hiding from me? The white-haired man asked, running his fingers gently through his beloved's hair. You can stop with your cold and apathetic act in front of me. I will let you know up front that I will never give up on you. You mean too much for me, Tsunade, Jiraiya said tenderly as he drew the love of his life close to him and allowed her to rest against the crook of his neck. You know I will do anything for you, the man said. As Tsunade tightened her hold on a section of Jiraiya's shirt, tears streamed freely down her eyes. I'm so sorry, she said. I nearly died during this war. It was when my troops and I were attacking one of the largest camps of RyugaXD, and just before I managed to kill the leader of the group, I thought I was going to die, Jiraiya said quietly, feeling the woman in his arms wince at his words. The man was not particularly powerful, but most of my men were down, and I was outnumbered 100 to 1. Jiraiya paused to cuddle closer to Tsunade. I lay motionless on the ground around hundreds of dead men. Barely conscious myself. And the only thing I could think of at the time was you, Tsunade. Tsunade put her arms around Jiraiya's body because she had been hiding from a very strange feeling in her heart for the past 5 years. The Senju made a vow to herself that she would never experience the anguish of losing someone close to her again, so she pushed Jiraiya and everyone else out of her heart. However, the man's words warmed her heart again, and the idea of losing Jiraiya to the war was nearly intolerable. I felt like a failure. I was praised by the village as one of the most powerful shinobi to ever live, but I couldn't even make the woman I love happy. I promised myself that I will do my best to stay with you after the war. I know you are trying to break all your bonds with people close to you so you don't have to hurt again. But I promise you, Tsunade, if you let me in again, I will always be with you no matter what. Nothing will take me away from you, Jiraiya said, closing his eyes and feeling satisfied with the warmth Tsunade provided for him. Jiraiya. Tsunade lifted her head from the crook of Jiraiya's neck and looked at the man who had loved her for more than 20 years. The woman mumbled, Jiraiya, as softly as the wind around them, but she was at a loss for words and didn't know what she could possibly say. In a matter of minutes, her perception of Jiraiya had changed significantly. He was no longer the perverted idiot in her eyes. Instead, he became her most valuable person. The Senju could not believe the extent of her current feelings for Jiraiya, to the point where she couldn't tell if she was in love with him or if she was completely dependent on him. With a sigh, the white-haired Sannin simply drew her back against him and said, "You don't have to say anything. Just know that you will never be alone and you don't have to be lonely all the time. I will always be here with you, by your side supporting you." Tsunade leaned down and kissed Jiraiya again, but this time the kiss was filled with love and affection rather than desperation. The blonde woman abruptly pushed herself up from Jiraiya's body until she was looking down upon his face. "Jiraiya," whispered the Senju, her eyes still full of tears. "I love you too," she said, straddling her teammate's lap and wrapping her arms behind his neck to draw him closer to the kiss. Fireworks were blazing in the sky as two Sannin gave their lives to one another, the festival and the war completely erased from their minds as they were completely absorbed in one another. They were both acting instinctively, too shocked and elated to respond logically, and the passion behind their love was growing significantly after more than 2 decades of waiting. They had spent the week after they confessed to each other staying at Tanzaku-gai. The festival may have ended, but to Jiraiya and Tsunade, it was heaven. The past week has been the happiest week of Jiraiya's life, and he has been spending every minute of every day with the woman of his dreams, made even better by the fact that Tsunade seemed so happy when she was with him. As the sun sets over Tanzaku-gai, the village is blanketed in an orange glow that illuminates the light-colored walls of the buildings. Sakura petals sail through the sky as if they were following the wind's melody. The charming new couple was once again on the castle roof, entwined with one another. Jiraiya had his arms wrapped protectively around Tsunade's waist, and his chin resting on her head as she buried her face deeper in the crook of his neck. He looked down at what he considers to be an even more beautiful view, his eyes full of life and hope that had been lacking for a long time. When Tsunade whispered, "What are you staring at, Jiraiya-kun?" Jiraiya was startled out of his daze. "Just wondering how my stupid drunken confession managed to make the most beautiful woman in the world fall in love with me," Jiraiya replied, grinning at his soulmate. Tsunade closed her eyes and buried herself deeper in Jiraiya's warmth. "I really appreciated what you said," the woman whispered. "I wanted that to happen because if they were to die in the war, I would just be in pain again. It was as you said. After Dan and Nawaki died, I started to lock myself away from the world, ignoring most of my friends, and because of this I lost contact with most of them." Tsunade smiled and said, "I was so caught up in that thought that I didn't realize you never abandoned me or gave up on me." As Tsunade spoke, Jiraiya's gaze was fixed on her. Jiraiya continued, lovingly stroking her hair slowly, "I had already given up on loving another. I thought it was too late for me. But your words showed me that I was not alone. It was you that was with me when Grandpa and Granduncle died, it was you that comforted me when Nawaki died, and it was you that stayed with me for days on end when Dan died." Tsunade concluded, tears streaming down her beaming face, "You never left me, you were always there. Now I can truly see clearly, and I can say without a shred of doubt, that I love you, Jiraiya." She then led upward to give Jiraiya a tender kiss on the lips. At the very least, Jiraiya was taken aback by the obvious feelings of love and happiness that he experienced now that he fully accepted the fact that Tsunade loved him and the impact of his confession. However, what really caught him off guard was the feeling of intense relief. Tsunade had recognized him and the things he had done for her, and he thought to himself, silently, as one tear ran down his cheek, it was not in vain. He responded to the kiss quickly, and as if a dam burst, all the passion and desire that had been building inside him for years was released into the kiss. What had begun as a loving kiss swiftly evolved into a passionate make-out session, as if they were both trying desperately to make up for lost time. Removing his tongue from her mouth, Jiraiya lightly sucked on her lower lips, enjoying the taste of the pair of lips he had wanted to kiss for years. Jiraiya pushed his tongue into Tsunade's mouth, aggressively brushing it against hers until Tsunade moaned into the kiss as she tangled her fingers into the man she love's white hair. But that was the limit Jiraiya had set for himself. He may be a pervert, but he did not want to risk the most significant relationship in his life. Tsunade took her hands off of Jiraiya's hair and began to rub from his wide shoulders, then down towards his muscular chest, making him shudder at her delicacy. Jiraiya took this as permission to continue kissing Tsunade as he laid her gently onto her back and then proceeded to rub her belly and waist sensually. When Tsunade noticed his hesitation, she took control and gently removed Jiraiya's hand from her belly and placed it on top of her amazing breast. The Senju heiress nearly burst out laughing when she saw Jiraiya's reaction to her actions. His eyes nearly burst out of his head. The woman he had been in love with for 20 years simply pushed him to second base. Tsunade, if you continue this I will not be able to control myself, Jiraiya said, trying desperately not to move his hand. To say he was surprised would be an understatement. Jiraiya, I want you. I need you. Tsunade whispered softly as she approached his ear and sucked on his ear, pushing Jiraiya over the edge. Jiraiya tilted himself so he was fully atop Tsunade, ready to continue, but Tsunade stopped him before he could. I would like this, but could we first return to our hotel room? Said a flushed Tsunade, breathing quickly. As he lifted his future lover up bridal style, Jiraiya grinned and said, anything for you, Suheim, aside from. I've had long-standing fantasies about carrying you to bed. It was a lovely morning, with a clear blue sky, singing birds, and a town just starting to awaken. At 9 o'clock, sunlight started to filter through the hotel curtain, illuminating Tsunade's beautiful sleeping face, which was filled with only expressions of happiness and fulfillment. Her eyelids began to twitch until one of them opened to reveal the man she would spend the rest of her life with. I never thought I would see him like this. Just 1 week ago, all I would have seen from this man was an obnoxious pervert with his signature perverted grin. But now, I can only see a handsome gentleman that loves me unconditionally, a man that can really bring out the good in me. Jiraiya was still asleep, with a small smile delicately adorning his face and his hair appearing to glow from the sunlight. Her head was resting on his chest. It was true that Tsunade no longer felt the need to gamble. She had gone past several casinos during the week, but she never gave it any thought because she was always too preoccupied with whatever she and Jiraiya were doing or discussing. Tsunade was not the only one who had changed. Jiraiya had not made any perverted remarks about any other women besides her. A week prior, Tsunade would have beaten Jiraiya to a pulp due to his perverted remarks to her, but following that confession night, she loved it whenever Jiraiya complimented her body. Tsunade's deep thoughts were interrupted by a slight twitch of Jiraiya's body, and as she looked up and saw that Jiraiya was about to wake up, she leaned up and kissed him gently. Slowly but surely, she felt Jiraiya return the kiss, nibbling on her lower lips, and she instinctively parted her lips to let Jiraiya's tongue explore her mouth sensuously. Suheim, can I anticipate a wake-up call like that every morning? Jiraiya grinned as he came to full consciousness. Only if you are good, Jiraiya-kun, Tsunade giggled in amusement. Oh, I'll be fine with him. Jiraiya kissed Tsunade on the lips and remarked, last night was the best night of my life. It was literally a dream come true. Tsunade whispered, well, then you better expect a lot more dreams coming true. Oh, this I can work with, he. Jiraiya responded ironically as he pressed closer to plant a kiss. The couple was interrupted, ting, 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 when something struck their glass window. Upon closer inspection, they discovered that it was two messenger birds tapping their beaks against the window. It seems Sarutobi-sensei have a message for both of us. Jiraiya read his own message and handed the other to Tsunade as he reluctantly withdrew with a sigh and walked towards the window to receive the messages. Tsunade proceeded to read, wow, expected arrival in 2 days, what's the hurry? It seems that he wants us back at Konoha. It does make sense, we have been gone for almost 2 weeks. Konoha needs more intimidating shinobi to prevent other villages from attacking during the village is vulnerable. Jiraiya replied calmly. Tsunade exclaimed with joy, well, we do have good news to bring to Sarutobi-sensei, he would be ecstatic that we are together. She was aware that her sensei had always wished for her to be with Jiraiya, even before she was dating Dan. With a Cheshire grin, Jiraiya said, yep, I bet even Orochimaru will be happy for us. Tsunade giggled at her lover as he said, Yosh, let pack and head home. Jiraiya was silently hoping that his news would make his best friend feel better because Orochimaru has been acting strangely lately. Tsunade and Jiraiya were walking hand in hand through the Konoha forest on their way home, and a small smile appeared on their faces as they walked down the road in a comfortable silence. It had been a long time since they had felt so at ease. Usually, they were in this forest to leave for a mission, but today the atmosphere was entirely different, and they were amazed at how magnificent and healthy the trees were around Konoha in comparison to the other places they had visited. Jiraiya whispered to the man, "It feels good to be back home," in a calm voice as he held Tsunade close to him with one arm. Tsunade murmured, "Home," as she looked toward Konoha. She then turned to face her new lover and grinned, saying, "Yes." Tsunade concluded, "It's home again," leaning into Jiraiya's arms. The two soon arrived at the enormous gates of Konoha, where their affectionate stance startled the gatekeepers. Jiraiya and Tsunade then approached the gatekeepers with smiles on their faces, not surprised that the village's residents, even the unassuming Chunin guards, would be taken aback by their new bond. Namikaze Jiraiya and Senju Tsunade are returning from a 2-week vacation, Jiraiya said professionally as he gave them their IDs and passports. When the two guards saw two of the strongest shinobi in Konoha up close, they became anxious. "Hij Jiraiya-sama, Tsunade-sama," the young man stammered, stumbling a little as he verified the validity of the passport. "Okay, everything is clear. Welcome home Jiraiya-sama, Tsunade-sama," he said. "Thank you," was Tsunade's joyful response as she retrieved her identification from the Chunin. As they continued to walk with their arms intertwined, the new couple attracted the attention of everyone they passed. This was something they had anticipated when they made the decision to make their relationship public. It was not often that two Sannin were so affectionate with one another, and many of the shinobi who passed by the attractive couple were surprised not only that they appeared to be together but also at Tsunade's happiness. The scowl that was permanently encased on the female Sannin's face was replaced by a big smile and lively eyes. "I know you both are very happy in heaven, Grandpa, Grand Uncle," the Sannin thought silently as she gazed up at the Hokage monument. It was true that Tsunade's expression resembled that of an upcoming bride. While she had not paid much attention to the village or its residents in previous years, she is now very happy to see how lively and happy the village is. She is also silently grateful that her grandfather's and granduncle's pride and joy had such prosperity. As he walked down the street, Jiraiya was also having a great time. His face was full of pride and joy as he held the most beautiful woman in Konoha in his arms. Some might even think that he was showing off. Jiraiya was enjoying the looks of surprise and jealousy that different men sent his way, so much so that he actually failed to notice how happy the village was after the war. For a long time, the streets of Konoha were mostly empty due to the villagers' fear of unexpected attacks, but a few weeks after the war, the streets were brim with laughter and joy. "Isn't the village incredibly vibrant?" Tsunade said, grinning with pleasure. Tsunade laughed in response to Jiraiya's smug response, "Yeah, although it might seem extra lively in our eyes." Jiraiya was clearly proud of their happiness. Soon after, the two arrived at the Hokage Tower, and after climbing the stairs, they went inside and went to the receptionist. The Hokage's receptionist had been in her job for a very long time. She was a naturally beautiful woman in her early 40s, dressed in a formal pantsuit, with long brown hair that fell to her mid-back and one bang covering one side of her forehead. Her name was Rina Hikari, and she smiled when she looked up and saw Jiraiya and Tsunade. "How are you today, Hikari?" Tsunade smiled as she asked. Since their sensei was Hokage, the Sannin and Hikari have a long history of frequent visits to the Hokage Tower. Hikari and the three members of Team Sarutobi quickly became friends, or, for Orochimaru, acquaintances. A smirking Hikari eyeballed the situation her two friends were in and said, "Oh, welcome home. I had a very good morning, and it seems that you are having a blast too." Tsunade, and Jiraiya looks ecstatic. Hikari squealed and Jiraiya gave him a sheepish back rub as Tsunade joyfully replied, "Yes, we are a couple now." Tsunade's face took on a slight red tint. An excited Hikari clapped her hands together and exclaimed, "Oh my Kami, I knew you two would get together. I always thought you two would make a cute couple." Jiraiya laughed. In a humble tone, the male Sannin said, "Thank you Hikari-chan, but getting back on topic, I believe Sensei wanted to see us. He gave us quite a rush to get back to the village." Hikari's smile vanished in an instant. "Yes, Hokage-sama needs to see both of you for some disturbing news," she said solemnly, which surprised the other two because Hikari rarely acted this way. With a simple nod, Jiraiya escorted Tsunade to the Hokage office. Office of the Hokage, known as the Kami no Shinobi, Sarutobi Hiruzen was regarded as the strongest kage of his generation and one of the most formidable shinobi in history. He had participated in 3 shinobi world wars and had killed several elite shinobi without raising a red flag, but the renowned shinobi was now deeply ashamed of himself. Sarutobi and the Jonin lawyer had been looking into a case involving the kidnapping of numerous children 3 days prior. The case was classified as an S-ranked mission because the Hokage was worried that other villages were stealing their potential future shinobi. The cause was discovered after the mission's participants followed the evidence to a secret room inside Konoha Academy. The kidnapper was Orochimaru, the Habisanin of Konoha. In addition to using the kids for gene splicing experiments, the evidence also revealed that Orochimaru had been abducting his fellow Konoha shinobi and using them as human test subjects for years. In an attempt to create methods that would give him immortality, he experimented on them. There were 2 reasons why Sarutobi felt ashamed. One was that he had been training Orochimaru since he was a young boy, and he was partly to blame for the man he became. Second, even though Hiruzen knew it was his responsibility to kill Orochimaru after the numerous disappearances were eventually linked to him, he was unable to do so at the time because he had such high expectations for his beloved student. Looking up at his teacher's Hokage photos, Sarutobi thought glumly, "Why am I so weak? I fully knew the implications of being Hokage. The safety of the village comes before everything, and now I may have unleashed a catastrophe into the world. I am so sorry, sensei." When Sarutobi heard a knock on his office door, he snapped out of his reverie. Sarutobi said, "Come in," in a firm voice. When Sarutobi saw who was at the door, his expression brightened significantly. When he saw his 2 other students enter the room with their arms intertwined, his expression instantly changed to one of immense surprise and joy. They turned to face their sensei with radiant smiles on their faces. Jiraiya politely said, "Hello Sarutobi-sensei. How are you this fine morning?" Jiraiya, are you and Tsunade?" The nervous sensei stumbled. "Yep, I finally got the her." Jiraiya's smile was genuine as she exclaimed. Jiraiya's claim was confirmed when Tsunade gave him a kiss on the cheek and a tighter hug. "I am very happy for you both. You definitely deserve each other, and I haven't seen you smile like that in a long time, Tsunade-chan," said Sandaime, delighted that his surrogate daughter was once again content, as Sarutobi joyfully approached his students and gave them a warm embrace. Jiraiya gave Sarutobi a cheeky smile as he went on, "I knew you would eventually manage to woo her, Jiraiya." He. "Thank you, sensei. But let's get back to the point. I believe that you wanted to see us because something bad happened when we were gone." Jiraiya responded with seriousness. Sarutobi sighed and sat down at his desk again, motioning for Tsunade and Jiraiya to join him. The Hokage began somberly. "About 10 days ago, me and a Jonin team set up by the Junin Corps were investigating an S-ranked mission. The Sandaime shocked his audience by revealing that someone was kidnapping children from various families and orphanages of Konoha, the missing numbered at 100. The further we went into the case, the more information was found. The graves of several bloodline users were raided, their corpses were missing some of their bones, all of which, when done correctly, DNA could be extracted from it. The evidence eventually led us to a hidden lab near the academy, and when we got inside we found numerous scrolls containing kinjutsu of all kinds." Jiraiya and Tsunade started to become disoriented by the unexpected revelations. As Tsunade gasped and Jiraiya gritted his teeth in rage, Sarutobi added, "We also found that not only children were used to perform these experiments, multiple shinobi from Konoha that were apparently Kia were also being tested." Sarutobi said, his face hardened, "From all the evidence, we have deduced that the person behind these acts is a Konoha shinobi, causing his 2 students to tremble with fear. Only one man was in all the missions those ninja we thought were Kia. He is your sibling disciple, Orochimaru." Tsunade exclaimed, "What?" clearly shocked by the turn of events. She always believed Orochimaru to be a deranged and cruel man, but she never imagined that he would be able to sacrifice his own ninjas and allies to fulfill the impossible goal he refers to as his ambition. Her gaze and thoughts quickly turned to Jiraiya. Since they were best friends and fiercest rivals, she understood how important Orochimaru's friendship was to him. Jiraiya was looking directly into his sensei's eyes with a blank expression on his face. "What evidence did you have, besides that he was on all those missions?" asked Jiraiya, who was emotionless. "Jiraiya, we had caught him at the scene of the crime. He himself admitted that he had done all those horrific acts and he attacked the Junin team and killed all of them." "Then why did you let him escape?" Jiraiya said, forcing Tsunade to glance at both of them. "I know that Orochimaru is strong, but I know that you could have defeated him. You let him get away." In a moment of embarrassment, the Sandaime said, "Yes, I couldn't bring myself to kill him." Tsunade whispered softly, "Jiraiya-kun." Without even looking at Sarutobi or Tsunade, Jiraiya turned around and left the room. Tsunade hurried to the door to catch up, but Jiraiya had already left. Jiraiya stood in the center of Training Field 9, which had been destroyed. The trees were either cut in two or burned to the ground. Nearly the whole training ground was covered in massive craters that were 5 feet deep each, and there was ash and debris all over the place. Many ninja and Anbu Black Ops had been alerted to the destruction, but when they all got to Training Field 9, they lacked the courage to stop Jiraiya because nobody wanted to deal with an enraged Sannin following what Orochimaru had done a few days earlier. Some of the ninja in the crowd also knew Jiraiya well. These were mostly older and had higher-ranking ninja who had previously worked with the Sannin. Hitaki Kakashi, Jiraiya's adopted son and a young student, was one of the few. He wore a standard Anbu Black Ops uniform that had been shrunk to fit his 14-year-old body, and he had spiky white hair that defied gravity, just like his surrogate father. A black face mask covers most of his face, and a slanted Konoha Hite ite covers his left eye. When Jiraiya of the Sannin adopted the White Fang's son, many were taken aback. It was because of what had occurred 8 years prior. Before he passed away, Jiraiya was good friends with Hitaki Sakumo. They frequently trained and drank together, and they were about the same age. Even more than his now treacherous teammate Orochimaru, Sakumo was the one person Jiraiya could rely on to have his back during the Second Shinobi World War. Jiraiya was deeply hurt by Sakumo's suicide, but he did understand the man's perspective. Sakumo could only maintain his honor and respect for himself, his fellow soldiers, and his village in this way. Even though Kakashi was already a chunin, he was only 6 years old at the time, and losing his father would be painful for a boy of that age. A few weeks after the White Fang's death, Jiraiya formally adopted Kakashi as his son because he knew the boy would need a family and a role model. At first, neither he nor anyone else was accepted by Kakashi as a father. Kakashi isolated himself and ignored everyone. He trained non-stop and would follow the official ninja code to the letter when on missions. Eventually, Jiraiya was able to get his adopted son to open up a little. They occasionally had polite conversations, but Kakashi mostly just wanted to ask for advice on how to get stronger. At the age of 13, Kakashi was added to Jiraiya's squad and was recently promoted to Junin. One area that was vital to the war effort was the Kanabi Bridge, which they had to defend. Namikaze Jiraiya, Hitaki Kakashi, Rin, and Uchiha Obito made up the team. While Obito and Rin were Chunin, Jiraiya and Kakashi were Jonin. Jiraiya let the youngster lead the team until they had to disband since he had just been promoted to Junin and needed experience. On that day, Kakashi gave the group a demonstration of his first assassination ninjutsu, Chidori. It was an extremely potent A-rank Raiden jutsu that involved focusing a lighting-natured chakra into his palm, changing the chakra into several electric bursts using shape manipulation, and then timing the electrical bursts with a speed burst to create a highly charged lighting jab at a target. Unfortunately, there are drawbacks to this type of jutsu. In order to maintain momentum, the jutsu must first be used as a burst of speed, which means it can only move in a straight line. Second, lightning charges the burst of speed, making the jutsu so quick that it is difficult to react to multiple enemies after it hits or misses one target. Jiraiya was aware that they could identify the jutsu's flaw before Kakashi could use his attack against a knowledgeable and experienced shinobi. Jiraiya had to split his team in two after warning Kakashi about the shortcomings of using that jutsu. He had to go to the rendezvous point, where the main Iwa forces are, while the rest of his team had to keep moving forward with the goal of cutting off the enemy's food supply. Although the mission was ultimately successful, the cost was too high for every member of the Jiraiya team. In order to save Kakashi and Rin, Obito had sacrificed his life. He even gave Kakashi his left Sharingan to replace his damaged left eye. Despite Jiraiya's aversion to admitting it, Obito's death had some benefit beyond saving his fellow soldiers. It had improved Kakashi. Kakashi was still the man he thought of before his death, and the mission had proven that his father was correct. After that, Kakashi had opened up to people, especially Jiraiya, and had become much more gregarious. The first time Jiraiya saw Kakashi act his age and the first and only time Kakashi referred to him as Tu-san was when the father and son were conversing one evening and Jiraiya relaxed his tone when discussing Sakumo. Rather than being reluctant to discuss his biological father, Kakashi revealed his true feelings to Jiraiya, even crying on his shoulder. As he stood on a tree branch on the edge of Training Ground 9, Kakashi sensed tremors in the village and wanted to know what was causing them. He certainly did not anticipate his adopted father destroying the training field and acting like a crazy man. His adopted father, Kakashi, was extremely concerned about this. Although he was a purveyor, he was generally cool and collected, so he had a fairly good idea of what had happened for him to act this way. The young Anbu member thought to himself, Jiraiya, you need to calm down soon. The villagers are already in distress. The Sandaime Hokage and Tsunade of the Sannin were on their way, as all of the ninja in attendance turned over after sensing two powerful chakra signatures approaching. As the village leader and the female Sannin approached the shinobi group, everyone's attention was focused on them. Is that Jiraiya down there, Kakashi-kun? Inquired the elderly Kage. Hi, Hokage-sama. I take it that he just heard of what Orochimaru has done. Yes. The Hokage said in frustration. Sensing that there were at least 50 shinobi nearby, Sarutobi concluded that they required some seclusion. Sarutobi yelled authoritatively, everyone here except Kakashi shall clear out of this area immediately. The three of them leaped down to the demolished area and approached Jiraiya after waiting until everyone has left. Jiraiya was facing away from the three, breathing heavily and perspiring. Tsunade approached him slowly and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder before saying, Jiraiya-kun. Please calm down. Jiraiya yelled, how can I calm down, as she turned to face Tsunade. With wild rage in his eyes, the man yelled, he was a Konoha shinobi, he was supposed to be loyal to the village, not kill its shinobi and desecrate the graves of our heroes. Tsunade remained motionless and silent, standing in the same spot. Tears slowly trickled from her eyes and ran down her cheeks. Even though Tsunade was a strong woman who had witnessed and felt her fair share of cruelty and rage, she couldn't bear to see Jiraiya behave in such a manner. She was afraid that she might have lost the man she loves again, and it made her nervous. Jiraiya quickly turned to embrace Tsunade after realizing his tone had been inappropriate when he saw her crying. The words, I am so sorry Haim, I didn't mean to yell at you, I just feel so betrayed and angry, I swore. Followed by Tsunade covering his lips with her own interrupted Jiraiya's apology. Although he was unaware of the two's new relationship, Kakashi was taken aback by the scene and dared not interrupt the Sandaime and Kakashi, who stood to the side. Tsunade gently stroked his hair and said, don't apologize you, Baka. I understand your feelings, I feel betrayed and angry at Orochimaru, but if we don't calm down first, we can't choose the proper action to take. Jiraiya looked from Tsunade to the two people who were standing close to him. Although he was disappointed at the time for allowing Orochimaru to leave without taking any action, he was never truly angry with his sensei because he understood that it was difficult to kill someone you considered family no matter what they did. After a while, Jiraiya noticed his adopted son staring at him with concern. The man, who detested worrying the people he was supposed to look after, was even more disappointed in himself when he saw his son. In spite of his eccentricities, Jiraiya cherished children and fatherhood. He didn't want Kakashi to worry about another of his fathers because he truly valued their relationship. Additionally, this circumstance brought to mind the three orphans he cared for in AIM, Yahiko, Konan, and Nagato. They might not have perished if he had stayed with them longer or trained them more diligently. Jiraiya has always placed some of the blame on himself, and he will be damned before he fails Kakashi. Kakashi, began Jiraiya, unsure of how to respond. Are you okay, Jiraiya? I have never seen you act like this. Softly, the anxious son asked. Jiraiya ruffled Kakashi's hair and replied, yes, I am fine now, Kakashi. I am sorry that you had to see me like that, with a sorrowful smile. Kakashi grinned broadly and said, it's okay, Jiraiya. I'm just glad you're okay. Sarutobi shocked everyone by approaching Jiraiya and bowing to him. Sensei, I am sorry of what I said, please don't bow. No, Jiraiya, I am sorry. As Hokage, it was my job to at least try to stop him. I was too weak emotionally at the moment. Sarutobi lowered his head even more in embarrassment and apologized. Jiraiya approached his sensei and lifted him from the bow, saying, it's okay, sensei. Tsunade and Kakashi grinned at the two, pleased that the situation had somewhat subsided. Jiraiya and Tsunade were granted the remainder of the day off by the Sandaime, who also stated that they would continue discussing Orochimaru the following day. Kakashi stated that he would return home in a few hours after returning to Anbu headquarters to report on his most recent mission. On their way back to Jiraiya's apartment, Tsunade and Jiraiya were walking down the main road, each of them thinking about something different. Before coming to the village, they both agreed that they would stay there because there was enough room for them and the Senju clan house was too large for them. Before deciding what to do tomorrow, Tsunade was delighted that they had some time to gather their thoughts and conduct their own independent analysis. Even though they had only been in the village for 5 hours, they already felt as though they had been here for days. This was their first day back in the village. The strain of the recent events was nearly intolerable. Jiraiya was still struggling to come to terms with Orochimaru's betrayal of the village. He was always aware of Orochimaru's unhealthy obsession with immortality, but he assumed that when he eventually realized it was not possible, Orochimaru would simply give up. Although it is already unacceptable to kill fellow Konoha shinobi, Jiraiya never imagined that Orochimaru would go to such lengths to fulfill his sick ambition. However, deforming their bodies and abducting their children were simply acts against nature. It was difficult for Jiraiya to accept that his best friend would be so corrupted, even though he knew he shouldn't question whether Orochimaru was truly that twisted. When Jiraiya felt someone grab his hand, he was startled out of his reverie. "Are you all right?" Jiraiya asked, turning to see Tsunade staring at him anxiously. "Don't think too much of it today, we can deal with it tomorrow." Jiraiya looked at Tsunade and said, "I'm fine, Haim, don't worry, it's just that I still find it hard to believe." Tsunade barely heard Jiraiya whisper, "I felt that Orochimaru was acting strange ever since the end of the war, but I never expected this. Did the village mean this little to him? Did our friendship mean nothing to him?" Tsunade comforted him by squeezing his hand. Jiraiya's face should only have that silly smile, not this moody complexion, and she detested seeing him like this. This lack of good traitorous scum was caused by Orochimaru. Even though they were on the same team, Tsunade always felt a little uneasy around Orochimaru, whether it was during missions or training. She always felt that there was something strange about him. Even before they became a couple, she was not nearly as close to him as she was to Jiraiya because of this. Tsunade asked, a little afraid of the response, "Are you going to try to bring him back?" Jiraiya could tell by the trembling in her voice that Tsunade was afraid he would abandon her to go after the traitor. "Suhaim, you are more important to me than anything," Jiraiya said jokingly at the end, grinning down at his lover. "Normally, I would have gone to find Orochimaru since I would have left the village to travel anyway, but now that I have you, I would never leave you alone. You better get used to me around here," Jiraiya said. As they walked to their house, Tsunade hugged his arm and giggled, feeling a great sense of relief. Jiraiya lived in a large but unadorned apartment. An L-shaped sofa was affixed to two sides of the spacious main living area. In the center was a sizable marble coffee table. A number of shelves that held tiny decorations were located on the wall facing the sofa. A glass wall encircled the kitchen, which was perpendicular to the living room. There were 3 rooms in the apartment: a guest room, Kakashi's room, and the master bedroom. The living room and the 2 smaller bedrooms were adjacent to the main bathroom. There is a bathroom connected to the master bedroom. A humorous "Welcome to our humble abode," was said by Jiraiya. Tsunade entered her new house. She had visited Jiraiya's house numerous times during the PSAT. Jiraiya frequently threw dinner parties and get-togethers for their team or a bigger group of friends. However, this time felt completely different from the previous one. She felt like she belonged, which was pleasant. With a relaxed sigh, Tsunade remarked, "I really like it here." With that, Jiraiya went to the kitchen. "I'll see if I can fix up some supper, but while I do that, you can put your stuff in our room." "Okay. Thank you, Jiraiya-kun." They assumed that there wouldn't be enough groceries in the house after their 2-week absence, but it turns out that Kakashi had restocked the refrigerator in spite of his quick trips. The two ate dinner together, occasionally striking up a conversation as they prepared something simple. The sound of the front door unlocking caused them to pause their conversation. They rolled over and watched Kakashi enter the house, clearly exhausted. When Kakashi heard his father say, "Hey Gaki, back from your report," he looked up to see the 2 surviving Sannin grinning at him. Kakashi said, "Hi Jiraiya, nice to see you again Tsunade-sama, with pleasure." "Kakashi, you can just call me Tsunade, seeing now that we will see each other every day, you don't need to be so formal." Jiraiya said in a whiny voice, "Yeah, I still really want you to call me Tusan." The shocked Anbu member inquired, "You will be living with us Tsunade-sam?" "Tsunade?" Dismissing Jiraiya's statement at the moment. "Yep, would you be okay with that?" Tsunade said with a smile. To which Tsunade replied with a smile, "Of course I would be okay with it, the more the merrier." In an attempt to make fun of the new couple, Kakashi said, "Good night Tusan, Ka-san." "Okay then, I already ate and I'm tired, so I'm going to turn in." He laughed when he noticed the other 2 people's shocked expressions. Jiraiya was undoubtedly taken aback when Kakashi referred to him as Tsunade Ka-san in addition to Tusan. Whoa, that was unexpected, Jiraiya thought. He turned to face Tsunade, who was looking at him with a look of mild surprise and wonder. "I wonder what it will be like if Tsunade and I had a child, then the 4 of us would be a family," he thought, turning to face the direction of Kakashi's room. "I bet he would have blonde hair like his mother, but it will be spiky like mine." "Wow, That will be a great life, he said to himself. While Jiraiya was daydreaming about his future, Tsunade was also trying to figure out how she felt. What is this feeling I am getting? I feel nervous. Kakashi may have been joking, but if me and Jiraiya are really together, then I will logically be Kakashi's mother figure. I think I would like that. It would be like when Nawaki was alive. Maybe Jiraiya and I can have another child. Oh, our child will be so cute. A little girl with long white hair, she will have to beat the boys off with a stick. That or Jiraiya kills them all first, hee. Tsunade thought inwardly, now that she felt comfortable trying to be someone else's mother. Have you ever wished to have children of your own? He was clearly attempting to ease into the subject with his informal tone. Before answering, Tsunade got up from her chair and escorted Jiraiya to the sofa, where she put Jiraiya down and then sat on his lap, nestling her head into the crook of his neck and resting her body against his frame. She closed her eyes and whispered, to be honest, I hadn't given it much thought until Kakashi called me Ka-san. I think I would love it if he saw me as his mother figure, and I think that I would also be ready if we had our own child, she said, sending a shockwave through Jiraiya. Jiraiya put his arms around Tsunade tenderly and whispered in her ear, I would love to have another child, especially since it will be our child. She wants to have a baby. This is great, but am I ready to be a father? But do you believe I'm prepared? When Kakashi was 6 years old, he was already a chunin, and I became his father. I never had to feed him or change his diapers. He had already learned how to act and how to see life from Tsukumo. I am unsure if I am capable of doing that to my own child. Tsunade said, you are definitely ready. You've always been good with children. Your strength and admirable outlook on life have earned you the respect and admiration of your genin. According to the stories you told me, even the 3 orphans you looked after in AIM love you very much. You'll make a fantastic father. All right, then. Let's begin creating our child right away, Jiraiya said as he abruptly picked Tsunade up in bridal fashion. As Tsunade was carried to her room, she squealed, ah. Moans and grunts of pleasure filled the master bedroom until the early hours of the morning, but fortunately Jiraiya had installed a silencing seal to prevent them from scarring Kakashi. The following day, the village elders and the Hokage advisors, Homura Mitokado and Kaharu Utatane, joined Jiraiya, Tsunade, and the Hokage back at the Hokage Tower to decide what to do about Orochimaru. Orochimaru will be listed as an S-rank missing nin in the bingo book. The Sandaime formally declared as he signed the bingo book document, he will have a kill-on-sight order and a bounty of 100 million ryo on his head. Although Jiraiya and Tsunade were initially taken aback by the large reward, they soon realized that Orochimaru was privy to many of Konoha's secrets, which the village could not afford to divulge. Anything less than an entire Anbu team should not pursue Orochimaru because he is an extremely powerful S-rank shinobi. The Sandaime concluded, any exception would be the 2 of you. Jiraiya, Tsunade. Jiraiya and Tsunade simply nodded in agreement. The Hokage concluded by saying, Jiraiya, tell your contacts to keep an eye out for Orochimaru. Once we have a precise location, we will launch a preemptive attack against the traitor. His tone made it clear to the others that he would no longer hesitate to kill Orochimaru. Jiraiya surprised the others by saying, hi, I will send them each a message via the toads, as I plan to stay in the village for the foreseeable future. This made Tsunade smile. Dismissed, the Sandaime said, grinning at his 2 pupils. They all said, hi, to each other. Jiraiya and Tsunade have been back in Konoha for a month. Both Sannin had to complete a number of missions during that time, but none of them presented any difficulties. Having so many missions was a little tiresome, particularly since they were unable to spend as much time together as they had hoped. They spent the majority of their time together at their apartment. Due to Kakashi's frequent missions as a new Anbu member, Jiraiya and Tsunade essentially had the apartment to themselves. Currently, Tsunade was quietly missing Jiraiya while lounging on her couch and relishing her day off. Her hand hovered over her belly, glowing a gentle green. Tsunade had begun training Shizune, her new apprentice. Shizune was the niece of Tsunade's late ex-boyfriend Dan. She had been living in a small apartment owned by her parents since the death of her uncle, but Tsunade had essentially been her unofficial guardian. Tsunade had been apprehensive about telling Shizune that she was dating Jiraiya. Tsunade was aware that Shizune admired her uncle and was thrilled to learn that he was seeing the well-known Sannin. Shizune might believe that she has forgotten about her uncle Dan now that she is dating Jiraiya. Thankfully, Shizune did not react negatively to Tsunade's new relationship. In fact, Shizune expressed her happiness that Tsunade had at last found someone who could bring her joy. However, Tsunade had a sudden realization while contemplating her circumstances on Shizune. At the height of their relationship, she had intense feelings for Dan, but she now understood that her feelings for Jiraiya were far stronger. Knowing that Dan was a highly respected Jonin, she never worried that he would die so quickly while on a mission. However, now that Jiraiya, a ninja, was significantly more powerful than Dan, she was always concerned about him. She had never dreamed about her and Dan before, but now she does so every day, and it's about her and Jiraiya. Although she now realizes that Jiraiya is her true soulmate, she knew that a part of her would always remember and treasure her time with Dan. They truly felt like a family during their final month of cohabitation. Dinner was typically prepared by Jiraiya, which Tsunade always enjoyed. As the heiress of the Senju clan, she never had to cook for herself, but she was making a concerted effort to learn how to cook for her family. Living with Kakashi was a fascinating experience. Even though he was only 13 years old, he was already a very skilled and powerful ninja. He was somewhat like her son, but he never referred to her as Ka-san after that first day. When he was injured on a mission, she would typically be the one to tend to his injuries. Kakashi had the option to go to the hospital, but he usually returns home hurt. Perhaps he wanted her to heal him because it gave him a sense of having his mother back. In order to determine whether or not she was pregnant, Tsunade was monitoring her own chakra signature and pulse. Her pulse would have an echo if she was pregnant, meaning that a second heart was beating in addition to her own. She can determine whether a second chakra network is consuming her chakra to keep it in shape by looking at her chakra signature. If so, a new life is developing within her. Her eyes widened as the Sannin's hand hovered over her torso. It is. Yes, exclaimed Tsunade. With a series of lightning-fast shunsen, Tsunade raced toward the hospital, completing the majority of the village in less than 3 minutes. Tsunade hurried inside to find a medic as soon as she got there. It just so happened that Shizune was the first medic she saw. After Tsunade assumed the position of head medic of Konoha, she developed a medical course that the young, black-haired Chunin was completing in order to train as a medical ninja in the hospital. Tsunade said, "Shizune, come over here," a little louder, drawing Shizune's attention and that of many others in the hospital lobby. The girl approached her teacher and surrogate mother and said, "Oh, what are you doing here on your day off, Tsunade-sama?" Tsunade took the girl's arm with a serious expression on her face. She dragged the girl along behind her and said, "I need you to check something for me, come to my office." After receiving an offer to become Konoha's head physician, Tsunade and her apprentice made their way to her office. The Hokage had expanded the hospital to a much larger size, and Konoha had made a lot of money from the lost villages after the war. Comparable to the Hokage's own office, Tsunade's room reflected her immense reputation as a medic in the elemental nations. It featured numerous cutting-edge medical devices along the sides, as well as its own medical library and archive. The woman sat down on her couch with her student and said, "Shizune, I need you to check my chakra signature and pulse." The perplexed girl asked, why, are you feeling chakra exhaustion?" She wanted to know why her teacher was unable to check her own chakra. Sannin, the blonde, was beaming broadly. "I think I am pregnant," Tsunade exclaimed with delight. "I missed my period a few days ago, then I checked my pulse and chakra this morning. Everything was shown positive, but I wanted a second opinion." The girl's face lit up with a smile. Shizune exclaimed, "Oh wow, this is great." Shizune's hands began to glow green as she examined her sensei's abdomen before checking her wrist pulse. "I'll check right now." The Chunin's expression changed from intent to hopeful to joyful. "Yes." The girl exclaimed joyfully. "You are pregnant, Tsunade-sama." With a joyful squeal, Tsunade hugged Shizune until she passed out. As she whirled Shizune around, Tsunade exclaimed, "Oh, this is the best day of my life." Shizune's face was turning blue, but she was enjoying the embrace with her surrogate mother. As she patted Tsunade's back, the girl squeezed out, "Tsunade-sama, air." With a radiant smile still on her face, Tsunade finally let the poor girl down. She couldn't wait to share their child with Jiraiya. Their efforts to become parents had paid off. Jiraiya was on a mission outside the village, but Tsunade recalled that she would likely return within the day. The blonde woman smirked as she considered the types of surprises she could pull off in the remaining time. The Sannin turned to face her pupil. The soon-to-be mother grinned at her surrogate daughter and said, "Shizune, please don't tell anyone about this for now. I want to surprise Jiraiya-kun when he gets back." The girl with the black hair laughed and nodded. "Sure thing, Tsunade-sama," Shizune exclaimed with joy. Jiraiya had just returned from a diplomatic assignment that required him to travel to the Hidden Moon village. Because of his formidable size as a Sanina, one of the strongest ninja Konoha had ever produced, Jiraiya was the front-runner to represent Konoha. It was an easy mission. Although he had 3 Junin with him for protection, he didn't really need them. The girls at the Hidden Moon were very attractive, and the Sannin was treated as a guest of honor. A month and a half ago, he would have flirted with them for a long time, but now his Tsunade Haim was the most beautiful person. Following his report to the Hokage, Jiraiya returned to his apartment, and Jiraiya was greeted by the divine aroma of dinner when he got to his apartment. He was famished after the long journey back to Konoha, so he smiled and opened the door. However, as soon as he saw Tsunade, his hunger was forgotten. A low-cut black dress that hung down to her thighs was on his attractive girlfriend. Additionally, it was form-fitting, highlighting her long legs, trim waist, and enormous chest. "Welcome home, honey," Tsunade said sweetly as the woman winked at Jiraiya while bending slightly to the side. As Jiraiya was still too preoccupied with examining Tsunade's body to respond to her query, he thought absently that he could pass away contentedly. Tsunade approached her man, took him by the collar, and pulled him down for a kiss while giggling to herself. Jiraiya finally snapped out of his daze and started kissing him back. Tsunade was drawn closer to Jiraiya as he put his arms around her waist. Tsunade's subtle rose scent had always appealed to Jiraiya, and he was savoring it as he kissed the woman he loved above all else. Following a lengthy make-out session, they collapsed onto the couch in an embrace, momentarily oblivious to the hot meal on the table. Jiraiya stroked the hair of his beloved. The man whispered near his lover's ear, "What's the occasion, Haim-chan?" Tsunade leaned closer to him and said, "Can't I just want to look good and prepare a good meal for you? Come on, honey, let's have dinner." Sitting across from one another were Jiraiya and his lover. Jiraiya told Tsunade repeatedly as they ate that the food was delicious and much better than the last time she had prepared it. Given that he was a genin and had desired to return home to Tsunade's food, Jiraiya might have been biased in what he said. He was happier than ever when Tsunade actually prepared lunch bentos for their team many years ago, and he could still remember how wonderful that was. The original Kage Bunshin led Jiraiya to the couch after dinner, while Tsunade made multiple Kage Bunshin to clear the table. Sensing that something was strange about Tsunade, who wasn't typically this vivacious, Jiraiya asked, "Tsunade-chan, do you have anything to tell me?" Before continuing, Tsunade took a few deep breaths. "Okay," she said. Jiraiya stared at her, still unsure of what had happened, and said, "I was checking my pulse and chakra signature this morning. And just in case I went to the hospital to get Shizune to check me also. Both Shizune and me had the same results. Jiraiya. I'm pregnant." Before and after the news, Jiraiya's expression remained the same, and she remained silent. As she caressed her lover's cheeks, Tsunade smiled and said, "Jiraiya-kun? Say something." As Jiraiya picked up Tsunade and twirled her around a couple of times, a huge smile appeared on his face. Jiraiya exclaimed, "This is great. I'm going to be a father," before abruptly setting Tsunade down and wearing a shocked expression. "Oh my Kami, I shouldn't have spun you around, right? Will that affect the baby, RuO?" Before Jiraiya had a nervous breakdown, Tsunade interrupted him. "Don't worry, none of what you did will affect the baby. I am one of the best medics in the world. You don't need to worry about me or the baby's health." Tsunade continued with a saucy grin. "Now take me to the room and make love to me." "What, but will that affect the bab?" Jiraiya began, but was interrupted as he was dragged into the bedroom and kissed. The village was overrun with a ton of missions, ranging in rank from D to S, at 10 in the morning in Konoha. Fortunately, a large number of ninja were appropriate for every mission. Sadly, though, there was only one Hokage. Sarutobi regretted his decision to become a ninja since he was drowning in paperwork. Although the elderly Hokage had grown accustomed to the paperwork over the years, the day had been especially taxing. One of Konoha's contacts had informed him the previous day that Kumo had plans to abduct the children of multiple bloodline clans in different nations. Among the few on their list are the Hyuga and Uchiha. 6-year-old Uchiha Itachi, the heir to the Uchiha clan, was already a genin. It would be devastating to lose him to Kumo because he was the only boy with the potential to be one of Konoha's greatest shinobi. There is currently no heir in the Hyuga main family, but Hyuga Hitomi, the wife of the Hyuga clan head, was pregnant. This must have somehow made its way out of the village because Kumo would not have planned to abduct a branch member who had a caged bird seal. In addition to being two of the most well-known and potent bloodlines of the elemental nations, the Hyuga and Uchiha bloodlines were also the main causes of Konoha's reputation as the most powerful of the 5 great villages. In case of any kind of infiltration, The Hokage had already dispatched multiple Anbu squads to patrol the village continuously. Several knocks on Sarutobi's door jolted him out of his work-induced coma. "Come in," was Sarutobi's professional voice. The heads of the Uchiha and Hyuga clans, Uchiha Fugaku and Hyuga Heishi, respectively, are visible when the office door opens. "Good morning, Hokage-sama," the two strong shinobi chanted. As the two clan heads took their seats in his office chairs, the Hokage said, "Good morning, Heishi-san, Fugaku-san. Thank you for coming to this meeting this morning, please sit down." A curious Fugaku asked, "May I ask what is this meeting pertaining, Hokage-sama? It is unusual that you need to talk to both Heishi-san and I alone." Heishi nodded in response. With a blank expression, Sarutobi began. "Yesterday we were delivered some disturbing intel." As Heishi and Fugaku both had somewhat shocked expressions, the Sandaime said, "It contained information stating that Kumo will try to kidnap the children of several bloodline clans throughout the world, including both your own." Heishi growled angrily, "Kumo dares to take such action so soon after the World War? It is safe to assume that they want to take advantage of the weakened state of the other villages after the war." "Kumo was the village that suffered the least damage," examined Fugaku. The Sandaime's statement that the news of your young son must have somehow been leaked outside the village further alarmed Fugaku. Sarutobi went on, "Kumo would definitely be after it," as Fugaku nodded. "The Sharingan and the Byakugan had always been two of the most powerful Kekkei Genkei in the world. There is no way that we will allow two of our most powerful bloodlines to be stolen from us. Therefore I hereby purpose that both your clans will work in conjunction with my Anbu to protect the vulnerable people of your clans." Both Heishi and Fugaku analyzed the situation with thoughtful expressions. "I can't let my heir be taken from me in any way. Right now, it would be beneficial for us to work with the Hokage. The Hyuga clan's sole heir will be the child that Hitomi and I have planned. The loss of him or her will undoubtedly cause discord among the clan's main and branch members. Hitomi will be devastated as well, and I can't allow that to occur." Heishi thought, "The Anbu Black Ops will undoubtedly be very helpful. The Hyuga is willing to offer its full cooperation to the Anbu Black Ops," Heishi stated. "As will the Uchiha," Fugaku nodded in agreement. As Heishi and Fugaku nod in agreement, Sarutobi said, "I am glad. Please arrange your own plans within the clan homes and I will tell my Anbu to act on your orders as long as it is for your protection." Dismissed. As they walked out of the Hokage office, "Hi, Hokage-sama," was said. Tsunade and Jiraiya were strolling hand in hand toward the Hokage tower. Walking at such a slow pace was refreshing. There were no clouds and it was a sunny day with a slight breeze to keep everyone cool. As usual, the village was bustling, and the residents appeared genuinely delighted to be alive. Tsunade looked up at Jiraiya and smiled, saying, "Sensei would be very happy when he hears our news." The white-haired man grinned at his lover and said, "Definitely, it'll be another grand K-child for him." Tsunade abruptly recalled something as the two strolled on. "Jiraiya-kun, what name should we give our baby?" Jiraiya suddenly had a knowing look on his face as if he was thinking. "Naruto. Senju Namikaze Naruto," the man said, his face softly smiling. After giving it some consideration, Tsunade remarked, Maelstrom huh? I like it. But how did you have such a specific name thought out so fast?" Jiraiya responded with a smile. "Naruto is the name of the protagonist of my first book, Legend of the Gutsy Ninja. I want our son to grow up to become a ninja like that. One that will be able to bring peace to the world." "I have never read that book. Do you still have a copy of it?" Jiraiya smirked and said, "I should still have a copy. Do you want to read it?" The woman said, "Yes, it should be interesting if you were willing to name our son after it." She then took a moment to think. Tsunade exclaimed, "Hey wait, what if we have a little girl instead of a boy?" Jiraiya smirked and said, "Oh, I know that it will be a boy, I got a feeling." With a challenging expression, Tsunade said, "Oh no, it will be a cute white-haired girl." "Oh when was the last time you won a bet, he. Tsunade gave Jiraiya a mocking glare and challenge, "Just you wait baka." The two Sannin reached the Hokage's tower before they even realized it. They went up to Hikari, who was concentrating hard at her desk. Similar to her supervisor, Hikari's desk was cluttered with numerous files and folders, probably all of the completed missions that required the Hokage's signature. As he and Tsunade approached the woman's desk, Jiraiya asked in a casual manner, "Hey Hikari-san, is Sensei available?" The woman was warmly greeted, "Oh hey Tsunade, Jiraiya." Hikari smiled and said, "Hokage-sama just finished a meeting, He should be free now except for the paperwork. Recalling how her sensei had constantly grumbled about his mountains of paperwork, Tsunade laughed. Well, he will be glad to catch a break. We need to talk to him for a bit. Okay. You two go ahead. Hikari went back to her work and chirped. Jiraiya knocked on the door a few times. He led the two of them through the door after hearing his sensei's voice say, "Come in." When the two Sannin entered the office, they saw that their sensei was surrounded by mountains of paperwork and appeared older and more unkempt than usual. Seeing the Kami no Shinobi in such a manner was incredibly amusing. Jiraiya joked, "Hey sensei, glad to see you so happy," while Tsunade laughed. When his students entered his office, Sarutobi's face brightened in the hopes that they would let him take a break from his work so he could chat with his surrogate son and daughter. The Hokage grinned and said, "Very funny Jiraiya. Are you and Tsunade-chan here to visit your beloved sensei?" As she pictured her sensei's face when she broke the news to him, Tsunade smiled and said, "Of course we are sensei. We also have some great news to tell you." The idea of more poor intelligence nearly made the Sandame wince. "Good news, I hope." The blonde Sannin grinned at her teacher and said, "Oh, I think you will be very happy." Okay, enough with the suspense. What is it?" "Tsunade should be the one to tell," Jiraiya said with a smile as she glanced at her. Tsunade turned to her sensei with enthusiasm and nodded happily. "Sensei, we're having a baby." Sarutobi's eyes were wide as he took in Tsunade's words. He suddenly had a broad smile on his face, clearly pleased for his students. He would consider the child of Tsunade and Jiraiya to be a grandchild. He got up quickly, went to his students, and gave them a firm embrace. "I am very happy for the both of you. I know you two will be great parents, and your child will be a great shinobi." Jiraiya nodded and laughed. Tsunade sighed as she heard her lover declare that it would be a son once more. "Of course, he is our son after all. He will be a very strong and talented shinobi if he is anything like his parents." When Sarutobi suddenly adopted a serious and concerned expression, Jiraiya and Tsunade were taken aback. "Sensei, is something wrong?" inquired Konoha's spy master. Sarutobi gave a nod. He inhaled deeply as he repeated to Jiraiya and Tsunade what he had just told Fugaku and Heishi. The fact that Kumo would act so carelessly immediately following a world war shocked Jiraiya. The most valuable assets in ninja villages are bloodlines. War would ensue if attempts were made to abduct children from the clans. Tsunade clenched her fists and questioned, "You are telling us this because you are afraid that our child will also be targeted?" "Tsunade-chan, you are the only known member of the Senju clan that is still alive. Not only that, but the child is the son or daughter of you and Jiraiya, two of the most powerful shinobi in the elemental nations. And Kumo will undoubtedly feel extremely threatened by such a person. So we must consider that they will try to kidnap your child even if the Senju clan doesn't have an official bloodline." Tsunade was furious. She was thrilled that she would soon become a mother and start a happy family with Jiraiya, but her unborn child was in danger from the Kumo bitch sons. "I don't care whether it would start a war or not, but if they dare to harm my child, I will do anything to destroy the Reikage and his damned village," shouted Tsunade. The Sandame closed his eyes, nodded, and sighed. "I know your personality very well, Tsunade-chan, and I understand that a mother will do anything to protect her child. But we shouldn't be talking about how we will react if they manage to kidnap one of our own. We must take precautions. If the heir of the Senju clan was to be kidnapped by Kumo, it will cause international havoc among the shinobi world, especially in Hai no Kuni." Jiraiya put his arm around his lover's shoulders and nodded. "Sensei is right, Tsunade. We are two of the Sannin. It will be very hard to harm our child if both of us are there with him. But despite that, we still don't want them to attempt it, as just a mere attempt will cause international disturbances that might trigger another war. That is something that neither the people or the village can handle right now." Jiraiya nodded his head in agreement. After calming down and nodding her head, Tsunade made the decision to try to figure out a solution. "So we should hide that fact that I am pregnant?" Tsunade's sensei said, "As much as I don't want to, I am afraid that it is the most simple and effective way." Jiraiya sat down to think and said, "That would be a very hard thing to do if we are still in the village. The villagers do not know that we are trying to hide the fact that Tsunade is pregnant. The Inuzuka and Hyuga will be able to tell by their noses and eyes that Tsunade is pregnant. They will just think that she is hiding it from her friends or the village as a surprise, but not to prevent a crisis. There will be nothing holding back the gossip and rumors that will begin to float around the village. The rumor will also spread like wildfire. Ever since last month a lot of people have seen Tatu together. It is no longer a surprise that we are dating. The people will spread the news that we are having a baby because they will be very happy if that is true. Our baby will be the heir of 2 Sanins and the Senju clan. Jiraiya's hasty conclusion enlightened Tsunade and Sarutobi. It was very straightforward. The villagers will continue to spread rumors because they are unaware of the consequences of their actions. We also can't just tell the Inuzuka or the Hyuga clan heads about our situation because that means they will have to tell their clan about the pregnancy. Stopping a rumor is nowhere near as hard as trying to prevent a leak of a secret that over 500 people knows about. Jiraiya put on a decisive expression and gazed fixedly at his sensei and lover. Jiraiya's statement, "Tsunade and I must leave the village until our baby is born. Maybe even longer," shocked the other 2 people in the room. It will not solve the whole problem, but it will prevent the Inuzuka and Hyuga from finding out about the pregnancy, thus eliminating the treat of rumors and therefore stopping the Kumo spies from pay attention to us. We can decide what to do regarding Kumo when we come back to the village after the baby is born, because then Tsunade will be able to fight without any restraint and the baby could be hidden within the village if need be. "No!" exclaimed the Fiel Sanin, glaring at her affectionate partner. "Jiraiya, I will not hide our baby from the world and have him or her live a life of isolation. If that is what it means if we stay in the village, then we will raise the baby outside the village." Sarutobi nodded, indicating that he was in favor of the plan. "Tsunade, the hiding will only be temporary, but if need be, we would have to raise the baby outside of the village. That will solve all the problems for our baby. Konoha will, in a sense, lose the 2 surviving Sanin, but it will still be preferable to losing the Senju heir. That idea is applicable. You 2 can be classified as doing a long-term mission assigned by me personally. Your family can return to the village once the threat has gone, or your child is capable of defending himself." The Sandaime responded rationally. As Tsunade put it, "Sensei, Konoha is the strongest shinobi village in the elemental nations. Why the fuck are we running away from a mere threat by Kumo?" Unexpectedly, Jiraiya was the one who responded. Sarutobi was very proud of Jiraiya at the time, and his words were those of a Hokage. He couldn't help but regret that he paid more attention to the traitorous snake than the fine shinobi. "Su-chan, it doesn't matter who is the stronger village. Just because Kumo is being unreasonable and irresponsible, it doesn't mean that we have the right to do the same thing. This whole situation can cause the 4th Shinobi World War." "They couldn't be so self-centered," Tsunade said grudgingly as she nodded in response to Jiraiya's response. "If they started a war and put the village's safety in danger for their own gain, her ancestors would be rolling in their graves. We still have a few weeks before the symptoms of my pregnancy will show, so we still have time to think about this. But we cannot let Kumo step on us over and over again. We must find a way to stop them and retaliate." Jiraiya and Sarutobi nodded in agreement. "But if we are going to be away from the village during my pregnancy, there is a safe place that we can go." Jiraiya asked in confusion. "Where is that?" He had just been considering the same thing moments before and could already think of a place that was safer than Konoha. "We can go to where my ba-chan is right now, Uzu no Kuni. On the shores of Hai no Kuni lies a small nation called Uzu no Kuni. Uzu Shiogakure, a formidable shinobi village in the elemental nations, was formerly located on the small island. Its ninja were among the most feared shinobi in the world because of their fa, injutsu, which was highly regarded. The Uzumaki clan, distant relatives of the Senju clan, was the village's dominant shinobi clan. After Konoha was established, the Shodem Hokage even wed an Uzumaki woman, which further cemented Konoha's bond with Uzu Shiogakure. The woman was not just any Uzumaki. She was Uzumaki Mito, a well-known clan prodigy and the daughter of the clan head. Additionally, Uzumaki Mito gave the Shodem the advantage over Uchiha Madara in their battle. The Senju and Uchiha leaders were nearly equal in strength at the time of the apocalyptic battle, with the Shodem's advantage being a narrow one. Madara chose to use his trump card after realizing that the odds were not in his favor. He called forth the Kyubi no Kitsune, the strongest Biju of all. The beast's power was apocalyptic, and it was truly amazing. It could send tsunamis to the coasts and level mountains and valleys with a single swipe of its tail. As the most formidable shinobi of his era, the Shodai of Konoha demonstrated his strength by defeating Uchiha Madara and seizing control of the Kyubi during the conflict. The man's will of fire had endured the battle and lessened the animosities stoked by the Uchiha, but it took everything he had. Despite the defeat of the Uchiha man, Hashirama still had to contend with the Kyubi, which will eventually awaken from the slumber the Shodai had put it in. Knowing that she needed to assist her husband, Mito used the Shishifa in to seal the Kyubi inside of her while it was unconscious. establishing and becoming the Kyuubi's first Jinchuriki. After the Biju was sealed, the crisis was at last over, but it left scars. The Valley of the End is what future generations will refer to as the Shattered Region where the battle took place. A location where a river never stops flowing, symbolizing the never-ending conflicts. The elemental nations were then gradually establishing several nations, each with its own shinobi villages. Uzu no Kuni, their namesake, is where the Uzumaki built their village. Despite living in two different countries, Konoha and Uzu maintained a close relationship. Even their shinobi flak jackets and the Uzu symbol were part of Konoha's shinobi symbol. Because of their proficiency with Fuinjutsu, Iwagakure and Kumogakure targeted Uzushigakure during the Second Shinobi World War. In the end, the two countries destroyed it. The village's survivors were dispersed throughout the world, trapped in purgatory for all eternity. Uzushigakure earned the moniker, the Village of Longevity, due to the renownedly long lifespans of its residents. This was also true of Mito Uzumaki, who was born with a natural force that was further enhanced by her status as the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Mito had remained in Konoha after her husband passed away, caring for her kids and then her grandkids. The loss of her son and daughter-in-law had devastated Mito, who loved her family dearly. They had to leave their kids behind while they were still very young. At the time, Nawaki was just a toddler and Tsunade was a recently instated genin. Their only remaining family was Mito. Naturally, she was extremely proud of her granddaughter after she distinguished herself during the war. However, Nawaki's passing was the final blow she could withstand. When he passed away, Nawaki was just a genin, but he had many goals and aspirations that she firmly thought he would achieve. She made the decision to travel to her now destroyed homeland after deciding she had to leave Konoha. Sarutobi still had a great deal of respect for his sensei's wife, so he finally allowed her to go, even though the Sandaime really didn't want her to go because she was a significant figure in Konoha. Thus, Uzumaki Mito returns to Uzu no Kuni after more than 50 years. Jiraiya and Tsunade were strolling silently through the village. Each of them considers a solution that would benefit everyone in the current circumstance. Uzu no Kuni would be a very safe place, Tsunade knew. Although it wasn't totally accurate, everyone in the elemental nations believed that Uzushigakure had been destroyed. Her grandmother, Uzumaki Mito, set out to locate the ruins of Uzushigakure approximately 15 years ago. She had written to Tsunade with the details of her discovery. Tsunade was shocked to learn that there were survivors when she read the letter. Although Tsunade assumed that everyone had fled from Uzu no Kuni, she was always aware that the Uzumaki were still alive. The village was largely destroyed, but one Uzumaki family managed to survive the fighting and remained in the village, attempting to rebuild their house, according to her grandmother's letter. There were just 4 members of the family. Their son and his fiancée copyrighty, a mother and father. They survived because they were protected by some large debris that concealed them from view and wasn't heavy enough to kill them. The parents were retired shinobi who were too old to fight in the war. The 2 younger ones were experienced Uzujonin. They had bravely fought on the front lines, and their survival was a miracle. They both attempted to protect themselves from the blast when a Kumo shinobi launched an A-rank Raiden jutsu directly at them. As a result, they both took the hit and divided the jutsu's damage equally between them. Although the damage spread was insufficient to kill them, it did temporarily incapacitate them. The enemy assumed the 2 were dead and proceeded to hunt down additional Uzu shinobi. Sadly, the 2 had sustained severe chakra network damage from the jutsu's Raiden chakra, making it impossible for them to ever shape chakra again. The remaining Uzumaki set up a seal to detect Mito when she reached the destroyed village. A family that was prepared for battle met her in a matter of minutes. The 2 Jonin were still able to practice some Fuinjutsu, and the older couple still possessed some of their best abilities, even though they were unable to use chakra. The Uzumakis were thrilled to learn that there were still Uzumakis who were prepared to support their homeland after she calmed down and introduced herself. Attempting to preserve what remained of their culture and Fuinjutsu, Mito had already spent more than 15 years in Uzu. Jiraiya and the Sandaime were both aware that Tsunade would be safe giving birth in Uzu because, in addition to the fact that it was a safe location, she would also have Uzumaki Mito nearby to support her in the event of an emergency. Tsunade was confident that her grandmother would be ecstatic to learn that her beautiful granddaughter was expecting a child and would be happy to welcome her in Jiraiya. In addition, Tsunade herself was missing her grandmother a lot. Her grandmother raised her in Nawaki after her parents passed away, and she will always remember Mito as that kind and gentle person. Tsunade whispered, "Jiraiya-kun, I think we should go to Uzu no Kuni during my pregnancy, being careful not to be overheard." Uzu no Kuni is definitely the #1 choice at the moment, Jiraiya replied matter-of-factly, nodding. Jiraiya's expression lightened as she said, it would also be great if your grandma would get to meet her great-grandchild. Tsunade gave a nod as Jiraiya. We must leave Konoha during your pregnancy, that much we know. Until we establish enough power that will intimidate Kumo, we must not allow an internation dispute to happen between us. Okay. Let's go to Uzu no Kuni. Yesterday, Sarutobi, Jiraiya, and Tsunade sent a messenger bird to Uzu no Kuni. Since the flight to Uzu no Kuni only takes 1 day, it should be reaching its destination very soon. Only Tsunade's relative could open the letter because it was sealed with her blood. Jiraiya and Tsunade had already packed and prepared to depart. They are merely awaiting a response. The Sandaime also created a mission file in which he stated that he is giving Senju Tsunade and Namikaze Jiraiya an S-rank long-term mission that, depending on the situation, could take anywhere from 1 year to 4 years. The extra 3 years will remove any unexpected dangers that might arise with regard to the Senju heir, even though the Hokage initially didn't want 2 of the surviving Sannin to leave the village for that long. Tsunade's pregnancy is only known to a small population in the village. Only the Hokage, Kakashi, and Shizune are aware, excluding Jiraiya and Tsunade. The Hokage had gotten in touch with Kakashi and Shizune and instructed them to conceal their pregnancy. Shizune's, who was the one to confirm the pregnancy, was not shocked to learn that a baby was born, but she was educated about the risks the child would face if his identity was revealed. On the other hand, Kakashi was shocked to learn that his father and Tsunade were expecting a child so quickly. He was thrilled that the child would be his younger sibling, something he had always desired, but he was also disappointed that he would not be able to accompany them to Uzu no Kuni. High-level shinobi are desperately needed in the village right now to frighten off possible adversaries and complete high-ranking missions to demonstrate to the outside world that they are still strong. Even though it was only for 4 years, Kakashi didn't want to lose his family again, even though he knew it was his responsibility as a Konoha shinobi to remain in the village. Leaving Kakashi alone in the village made Jiraiya uneasy as well, but he knew there was no other option. Kakashi and his relationship developed into a genuine father-son bond. They frequently trained together and exchanged ideas. Occasionally, Kakashi would confide in Jiraiya about the stress and strain he was under from his frequent Anbu missions. Jiraiya was very understanding and would offer wise counsel to his son. They both feared that as time passed, their relationship would worsen. Tsunade was already asleep at 8 o'clock in the evening. She had a busy day because she had to give the current hospital staff a lot of new tasks to complete in order for them to replace her. In the hopes that Shizune would continue to advance as a medical ninja, she also left Shizune a number of scrolls containing advanced medical ninjutsu that she had created. At Tsunade's side, Jiraiya was stroking her still flat stomach, which was hidden by a white nightgown, and brushing a stray hair away from her face. Despite having Kakashi and having looked after the 3 aimed children, Jiraiya was thrilled about the baby because it would be his first time caring for a newborn. Being the heir of the Senju clan and the child of 2 Sannin, his child would surely be very powerful, making him the child of prophecy he has been searching for all his life. Tsunade nudged Jiraiya out of his reverie, and he looked down to see his lover's stunning brown eyes staring back at him. He would never grow weary of staring into those eyes for the rest of his life. He actually desired to live out the rest of his days with Tsunade. Sorry, did I wake you, Haim? Tsunade smiled and leaned up to kiss him, saying, yes, but it's okay. I love waking up to you. Jiraiya thought to himself, I need to ask her now, and returned the kiss. To Tsunade's slight surprise, Jiraiya broke the kiss and looked directly into her eyes. Is there a problem, honey? Tsunade-chan, will you marry me when we get to Uzu no Kuni? Jiraiya asked uneasily, a little scared of her response. Is it because of the baby? Does he feel obliged to marry me? Tsunade thought vulnerably, is it because of the baby? Does he feel obliged to marry me? But after giving it some thought, she realized that Jiraiya wouldn't want to marry her just because of the baby. He loves her, and he would ask her no matter what. Looking back at Jiraiya, she noticed that he had on a sad and regretful expression, and knowing that he might be worried that she would reject him, she blurted out, yes. Jiraiya's intelligent reply was, huh. The biggest smile Tsunade could manage, she said, yes. I would love to marry you, Jiraiya-kun. Jiraiya's face lit up with a broad smile as he gave her a violent hug while yelling, yes, yes, yes. Tsunade smiled and gave Jiraiya another kiss, which relieved him of his high. She then slowly undressed and straddled his waist, saying, and now this is for celebration, and for you waking me up. For hours to come, their room would be filled with grunts and groans that would reverberate within its wall. Jiraiya was the first to wake up the following morning, and seeing that Tsunade was still asleep, he chose to just lay there and think. Jiraiya's thoughts turned to Kakashi, and he realized that although the boy was strong physically, he was mentally fragile. He had to work very hard to open up to people after losing his biological parents, and he had suffered a great blow when Obito died. Now that he had to be separated from his family, he might not be able to handle it. Knowing that he needed to speak with Kakashi, Jiraiya made the decision to go to Kakashi's room. The picture of Kakashi's biological father Tsukumo hugging his pregnant mother Hitomo was the only picture he had of his entire biological family because his mother died during childbirth. Kakashi was staring at the ceiling of his room, which was rather plain for a 14-year-old boy. The bedroom had light yellow walls with a number of pictures hanging on them, including pictures of Konoha and various scenes. Several bookshelves were stocked with bingo books and ninja scrolls, and he read Icha Violence, a series of books written by his adopted father before he began dating Tsunade, nearly every night. He also found several adult magazines that he enjoys reading tucked away between encyclopedias. As he lay on his blue twin-sized bed, thinking about what his life would be like after Jiraiya and Tsunade left, Kakashi realized that he had made a lot more friends than he had in his entire life. Sarutobi Asuma, Yuhi Kurenai, and Shizune were all very pleasant to talk to, and despite his eccentricities, Maeda Guy was a good friend and a good sparring partner. He had been enjoying living with his adopted family for the past month, which was the first time in his life that he had a complete family, but like all things, it must end. "Come in," Kakashi said in his newly relaxed tone. As soon as the door opened, Jiraiya appeared. Kakashi instantly wiped all of his negative emotions from his face, but Jiraiya was able to see a hint of his actual emotions. Jiraiya said, "Hey, Gaki, how are you feeling?" in a kind tone. "I'm fine, Tu-san." After a few weeks of calling Jiraiya Tu-san, Kakashi no longer felt as though he was betraying his biological father because he knew that his birth father would want him to start a family of his own. Even though he is a little annoyed that Kakashi is once again concealing his feelings for other people, Jiraiya smiled when he heard Kakashi refer to him as his Tu-san. "Kakashi. I'm sorry." The man made Kakashi look up at him. "I know it's a bad time to leave you alone in the village, but I want you to know that you will never be forgotten or unloved. As your father, I promise to always love and support you, and the same is true for Tsunade. She may not express it aloud, but she genuinely cares about and values you, and she truly enjoys being your mother figure." Jiraiya was surprised to see Kakashi cry because he had never seen the boy cry before, but he was also relieved because tears will help release some repressed feelings of Kakashi. Is he serious? Maybe I won't lose this family after all? Kakashi thought, and then he felt something wet drip down his face. The young man had not cried since the death of his father, and he thought that crying was a sign of weakness and fragility. Jiraiya approached Kakashi slowly to give him a fatherly hug. With a startling sense of relief, Kakashi nodded into his father's shoulder and said, "It's okay, you will always have a family, you have a father, a mother, and a soon-to-be brother or sister." After 5 minutes or so, Kakashi calmed down and they started chatting, and then Jiraiya noticed some familiar sidebook covers of Icha Violence. "Oh ho ho, what do we have here?" Jiraiya teased as he approached the bookshelf to retrieve the books he had written. "I see you are enjoying my beautiful masterpieces of art, and seeing the condition of the books you read them a lot," Kakashi said, his face burning as his father caught him reading those books. He tried to think of an excuse, but his masked mouth just moved up and down without saying anything. Don't worry, Gaki. It's common for children your age to be interested in this genre of literature." With a perverted smile that he hardly ever had anymore, Jiraiya said, "It might be even worse for you because you get to look at those kunoichi in those tight form-fitting anbu pants." As a growing boy going through puberty with crazy hormones that appeared out of the blue, Kakashi sighed and gave up trying to find an excuse. "Yeah, I really like those books. By the way, are Kasumi and Natsuki going to make it as lesbians?" "Okami ha ha ha. I bet you really want to know if those hot lesbian beauties would have sex right?" Jiraiya said, maintaining a straight face as he listened to Kakashi's question before breaking into a grin and then bursting into laughter. Although disappointed that the Icha series was cancelled, Kakashi was surprised that the books were based on his father's experiences. "Well, I don't think I will continue these books anymore as I already have Tsunade, and since most of the inspiration from the books are my personal experiences, I won't have any inspiration, because I don't want your mother to kill me," he said, nodding angrily as he burned up. With an awe in his voice, the young man questioned, You mean that the stories were based on your life? Oh yeah, I met some beautiful woman when I was traveling, hehehe. Wow, you're the man too, San, but it sucks that you can't continue the series. With a detached expression, Jiraiya said, it is true that I like writing, especially those books, but Tsunade is all I need for the rest of my life. You would understand when you find that special girl of your life. His face then broke into a smile as he went on. Hey, I got an idea. How about you continue the series for me? As he heard his father's words, Kakashi choked on his own spittle. What? Yeah, I am sure that you will have your own stories to tell as you work in Anbu. After all, there is nothing like adrenaline-filled mission as foreplay, right? Laughed the man. I will contact my publisher about you tomorrow. Oh, you are gonna do great. Wait to San, are you sure? Yes. In the end, Kakashi accepted Jiraiya's offer. Personally, he was thrilled about it. He had always enjoyed the fairer sex but had never really looked for a girlfriend. Additionally, he has become somewhat of an inner pervert since being adopted by the former super pervert. Despite his pervert tendencies, he has a great deal of respect for women and does not want to use them the way some men do. Because he didn't want to play with her feelings and didn't really see Rin that way, he was able to date her. For research purposes, he might begin flirting with some of the girls he liked starting tomorrow. Mito Uzumaki lived in a modest home that she and her surviving family members jointly constructed. Hirako and Hikari Uzumaki are the names of the older couple, and Hiroshi Uzumaki, their son, married Tomo Uzumaki. They were able to retrieve the majority of Uzu Shiogakure's scrolls and jutsu during their 15 years together. Hirako passed away from old age at the age of 77 approximately 10 years ago, and Hikari followed a few months later at the age of 75. Since Hiroshi and Tomo were members of the Uzumaki clan, they ought to be long-lived and possess a strong life force. Unfortunately, their lifespans were significantly shortened after being struck by the Raiden Jutsu that destroyed their chakra network. Tomo was taken a few days ago after giving birth to a healthy girl, and Hiroshi passed away naturally a few months ago. Tomo apparently only had enough willpower to last until giving birth, but she used it all up during the birthing process, and she passed away just moments after seeing her gorgeous daughter. Before they passed away, they both came up with the names Kushina and Uzumaki Kushina for the baby girl. The infant already had a pair of stunning violet eyes, pale skin, and hints of Uzumaki's red hair. Mito immediately accepted the task of caring for Kushina after they left her in their care, but she knew she wouldn't live long enough to see the girl grow up and that she would have to return to Konoha. As Uzumaki Mito prepared to pack up her things and leave for Konoha, she felt something approaching while holding little Kushina in her arms. She waited for the object to appear while standing on guard, and when she realized it was a messenger bird, she relaxed. Since she hadn't heard from Tsunade in a few years, she was also shocked to learn that it was from her granddaughter. Thinking it might be an emergency, the elder opened the attached letter quickly. She swiftly wiped some of her blood over the seal, surprised once more to find it was sealed with a blood seal. When she finally got her hands on the letter, she started reading it. A smile appeared on her face, and it only grew bigger as she read it. When she finally realized that Tsunade and Jiraiya were expecting a baby, she was overjoyed. Knowing that Jiraiya genuinely loved her granddaughter and would soon have a great-grandchild, she had always wished for the two to be together. To make matters worse, they wanted to visit Uzu while pregnant, despite the fact that it was dangerous. Mito was thrilled that Tsunade would visit Uzu. Since Tsunade was arriving, Mito could tell her to bring more supplies and resources so they could stay a little longer. In all honesty, Mito did not want to leave Uzu, but she had to for Kushina's sake. Kushina began to laugh at her surrogate great-grandmother as if noticing her joy, which made her appear even cuter. As she came up with a response for Konoha, Mito happily said to the infant, "Oh, Kushi-chan is also happy, right? You are going to be great friends with Tsunade-chan's baby." Since she was still the clan head, Mito granted them access to the Senju clan account after she expressed her desire to have her granddaughter live with her once more and her need for additional supplies and resources. While she waited anxiously for her granddaughter and grandson-in-law to arrive, she attached the message to the Konoha messenger bird and let it fly back to Konoha. Sarutobi was in his office, pondering. There were multiple 3-foot-tall piles of paperwork on his desk. The civilian council learned of Jiraiya and Tsunade's long-term assignment on that day, but the Hokage typically only receives one stack of paper that high in a single day. The Hokage and the Shinobi Council had always had a lot of trouble with the civilian council. Civilians have played a significant role in Konoha's society ever since it was established as a shinobi village. The civilian council was established because the village would need to take into consideration the opinions of the civilians, who make up more than half of Konoha's population. Initially, the civilian council could only participate in issues that directly affected the village's civil affairs. That has changed since the Second Shinobi World War, when the village was constantly in turmoil due to the unexpected deaths of multiple clan heads. Senju Tobirama, the Nidaime Hokage, was compelled to grant the civil council additional authority so that they could assist in managing the village's internal affairs during the Shinobi War. The Konoha Shinobi clans took a long time to recover from the war. The civilian council had more than enough time to find ways to keep their hold on power by creating excuses and openings. 50 years have passed, and the civilian council has grown increasingly corrupt and powerful to the point where they can now control the entire Konoha economy at will, stopping all shinobi wages and payments. They have even figured out how to make money using Konoha's shinobi. Throughout the lands, the Sannin are regarded as cage-level shinobi. Several adversaries have decided not to attack Konoha because of the Sannin. Many daimyo and minor village leaders would pay a considerable sum of money to hire any Sannin because of their reputation. The Hokage was buried in paperwork for the same reason. In order to help some daimyo or leaders submit their mission request directly to the mission assigning faculty for a sizable sum of money, the members of the civilian council would use their influence in Konoha. The demand amongst the council members increased when Jiraiya and Tsunade were the only ones left to assign missions to following Orochimaru's defection. Conflicts had already arisen between a number of civilian families who hold civilian council seats as a result. Due to their heavy spending habits, which they developed during their time of wealth, the civilian council members will no longer be able to maintain their regular cash flow now that the Hokage has assigned the two surviving Sannin on a long-term mission. This could lead to the ruin of several families. Even though Konoha had to deal with mountains of paperwork, the entire situation had actually helped the island nation. Konoha would soon have a Senju clan heir, who could potentially bring the Senju clan back to the city. The civilian council would also lose a significant amount of its financial clout, making them open to attacks by the Shinobi Council and Hokage, who could regain some of their power if they are successful. Hikari's knock on his office door interrupted Sarutobi as he was reluctantly going through his paperwork. The Sandaime beckoned her in and exhaled in relief. "Hokage-sama, I received this scroll from the messaging department. It was carried back by your personal carrier," said Hikari. As he is given the note, Sarutobi exhales nervously. Sarutobi waited until his assistant was outside before carefully opening the envelope and saying, "Okay. Thank you, Hikari-chan, you are dismissed." He hasn't even heard from his sensei's wife in over 15 years. As Sarutobi started reading the letter that was affixed to the scroll, he became extremely happy that Mito had been able to reconstruct a portion of Uzu Shiogakure and had even formed a relationship with the survivors, even though they had passed away too soon. At the end of the letter, he expressed his satisfaction that Mito had accepted their proposal. To get Jiraiya and Tsunade back, Sarutobi dispatched a few anbu. At Ichiraku Ramen, a recently opened ramen shop, Tsunade, Jiraiya, Shizune, and Kakashi were enjoying a pleasant meal together. Tucci, the proprietor, was a gregarious and amiable man who would encourage patrons to come back. As he continued to slurp the broth, Jiraiya remarked, "I have to admit, Tucci, your ramen is unquestionably the best ramen I've ever had. The noodles and broth are both complementing each other perfectly, truly amazing." "Yes, I agree. I am usually not a fan of ramen because of the oily broth, but your ramen is very light and your broth is very refreshing," Tsunade replied with a grin. "I will definitely come back for more." Shizune and Kakashi nodded in agreement as the Sannin was completed. Tucci grinned and said, "Thank you for your kind compliments, Jiraiya-sama, Tsunade-sama. I am very glad that such famous shinobi like yourselves enjoy my food." As the four patrons finished their ramen, they simply grinned. Behind Tsunade and Jiraiya, a few unexpected chakra signatures appeared. In retrospect, they discovered that an Anbu team was searching for them. "Jiraiya-sama, Tsunade-sama, Hokage-sama has requested your audience." It's safe to assume that Tsunade and Jiraiya were referring to Uzu Shiogakure's response. The Anbu team nodded and departed, to which Tsunade replied, "Hi, we will be there shortly." Shizune and Kakashi were left alone after the two Sannin paid for their meals and departed for the Hokage office. As Shizune watched her sensei and her sensei's fiancé copyright depart, she let out a sigh and abruptly adopted a somber expression. It was reasonable for her to believe that the meeting was about their leave. Shizune felt excluded even though she was aware that the two Sannin's best option was to leave the village. Over the years, Tsunade has taken on the role of mother to her, and she doesn't want to be alone ever again. Are you okay, Shizune? Kakashi asks after noticing Shizune's abrupt change in mood. Shizune gave the Anbu member a quick glance before hesitatingly answering. I just feel like that I am losing my family all over again. Shizune responded solemnly as she looked away from Kakashi. With a sigh, Kakashi touched the girl's shoulder. Shizune, I know exactly how you feel. Jiraiya has become a full father figure for me, and I also feel like I am losing my family right now. But Toussaint reminded me that we will never be alone. They will return in a few years. They will not forget us or stop loving us, so you don't have to worry. Shizune chose to communicate her emotions more even though she felt better after hearing his words. Shizune's eyes filled with tears as she expressed her feelings. Thank you, Kakashi, but I still don't like being alone for the few years. It makes it even worse when I'm all alone in my home, with no one there to welcome my return or ushering my goodbye. When Shizune felt someone put their arms around her body, she stopped crying. Shizune blushed as she looked up and saw that Kakashi was embracing her, temporarily erasing her sadness. Kakashi is hugging me, she said. Shizune began to pant as she held onto the boy's uniform and allowed him to continue hugging her. Shizune and Kakashi had spent more time together over the years, primarily on missions where she served as the team's medic. She must confess that she was drawn to him because she had healed him several times. Shizune, you still have your friends. I can tell you from experience that it is not good to keep one's emotions at arm's length. Doing that would just slowly put one further into their own loneliness. Kakashi unexpectedly had a plan. Kakashi nervously drew Shizune's attention, asking, Shizune, how about you move in with me? Kakashi concluded, looking apprehensive. Shizune would have had a million guesses, but she would never have guessed that, so to say she was shocked would be an understatement. I have no ulterior motives, I just thought that the both of us could benefit from this. It would seem like that we are still living with family. I would be there to welcome you home, tell you goodbye, and you could do the same for me. Kakashi replied. So how about it? Shizune was thinking about what it would mean to live with Kakashi. It would be preferable to living alone in that large apartment, even though there may be some rumors that start. Indeed, Kakashi was correct. Since their relationship now resembled that of a brother and sister, it would be like living with family once more. The two teenagers realized they were still hugging each other at that point. I might need to think this over. But I would really like it if we lived together. They split up faster than lightning, Shizune with a tomato-like face and Kakashi with a slight flush. Tucci may have heard what the two shinobi had to say because he was grinning as he gazed at them. The young Anbu cleared his throat and got to his feet. Kakashi said, I have a mission, I'll see you later, okay? As Kakashi used Shunshin to exit the area, a red Shizune whispered, Hi, with a gentle smile on her face. About 10 minutes ago, Jiraiya and Tsunade had reached the Hokage office. The letter Mito had sent them was shown to them both by the Hokage during that period. That Tsunade was correct that Mito would be delighted to have them made Jiraiya very happy. The deaths of the few Uzumaki survivors also caught him off guard. It is unfortunate that such a strong clan has declined to such small numbers. Uzumaki Mito and Kushina were the only remnants of the pure-blood Uzumaki. Tsunade was only partially Uzumaki, as was their child. The loss of some of her surviving family members saddened Tsunade. However, she was also very happy that Kushina was born prior to her mother's passing. This suggests that the Uzumaki clan had a chance to live, and Kushina could be a wonderful friend to her child. Sensei, how much time would it take for you to gather to resources Mito-sama needs? Jiraiya responded. It would take 1 day for me to gather the food and raw materials, so you two can leave the day after tomorrow. Hi, we will leave the day after tomorrow then. Dismissed, Jiraiya and Tsunade nodded and made their way to the door. As he walked away, Jiraiya said, Enjoy your paperwork, sensei, which caused Tsunade to laugh and Sarutobi to frown. After receiving Mito's letter a day ago, Tsunade and Jiraiya had gathered all the materials Mito had asked for. It was much simpler to travel because Jiraiya had sealed all the material into different scrolls. Jiraiya and Tsunade were both quite looking forward to the trip. After many years, Tsunade would finally get to see her cherished grandmother and travel to Uzushiyogakure. Because their baby was due during this trip, Jiraiya was also overjoyed. Officially, they would be a family. As an orphan himself, Jiraiya had always longed for a family of his own, and now he would have it. For the ensuing years, Jiraiya, Tsunade, Shizune, and Kakashi were spending their final moments together. When Kakashi informed the two Sannin that Shizune would be moving in with him, they were shocked. Despite Kakashi's explanation, Jiraiya continued to tease him mercilessly. "Be sure to use protection," or "Don't do anything I wouldn't," are examples of such statements. By threatening to castrate him with a spoon if she had become a surrogate grandmother by the time she returned, Tsunade also made sure he didn't do anything inappropriate to her surrogate daughter. Naturally, Shizune just stayed silent and blushed at their words the entire time they were speaking. The moment had finally arrived for the two Sannin to depart. After embracing Shizune and Kakashi, they embarked on their quest to reach Uzu no Kuni. Kakashi prayed, "Come back safely and soon, To-san, Ka-san." Shizune prayed, "I hope you have a healthy and happy baby, Tsunade-sama." Jiraiya and Tsunade have been out of Konoha for 36 hours now. Most people, including most shinobi, would only see a blur or a whiz of sound when they passed them because they had traveled at full speed. They were traveling at a high speed because they could not afford to be noticed or in any way let anyone follow them. Uzushiogakir's continued existence was a highly significant secret because, should it be known, numerous shinobi villages from different countries would attempt to either completely destroy it or steal any surviving ninjutsu or fuinjutsu scrolls. "How much longer will it be until we arrive, Tsunade-chan?" Jiraiya responded. Tsunade looked at the map and said, "Based on the map, we should reach the borders of Uzu no Kuni very soon." It is difficult to determine the precise location of the recovered portion of the village because the map the two are using is merely a simple geological map that is frequently found and used. Despite the protection seal she applied, Mito was unable to include a map in her letter because she didn't want to run the risk of it being intercepted. The letter contained a plan that Mito had encrypted. "I have a special ability to sense other people's emotions," she explained. It was the pinnacle of chakra sensing. Mito can sense Jiraiya and Tsunade's presence and will come out to welcome them back to the village when they are within 10 miles of Uzushiogakure. Jiraiya and Tsunade were gazing out over the horizon, which displayed numerous islands in the enormous Uzu no Kuni body of water. Abruptly, a line of the horizon was obscured by a shadow. The shadow changed more and more into a human shape as it approached the mainland. "Is that?" Jiraiya asked, her eyes narrowed. As the shadow lightened, it revealed long white hair trailing behind the individual. Eventually, the person's face was exposed, revealing Uzumaki Mito with a kind grin. The face of the woman who had raised Tsunade for the majority of her adolescence and taught her everything she knew about fuinjutsu would always be in her memory. Grandma must have missed her, and the Sannin felt a little bad for allowing her to live alone in Uzu for so long. The cry, "Baa-chan," came from Tsunade as she rushed to embrace Mito. Grinning, the Uzumaki leader welcomed her young daughter into her arms. Mito gave Tsunade a motherly embrace and said, "It is great to see you too, Su-chan." The old woman patted Tsunade's head as she used to do when her granddaughter was a young child, whispering, "Oh, I missed you, honey." Jiraiya smiled as he approached the two, and the man bowed and said, "It is great to see you again, Mito-sama." "Oh, Jiraiya-chan, just call me Ba-chan like Su-chan. We are family now." Mito broke the embrace with her granddaughter as she turned to face Jiraiya. The three of them grinned together before Mito led the way to the village. The three ninjas navigated Uzu no Kuni's numerous islands by water. They are getting closer to the nation's epicenter. Soon after, the group arrived at a sizable island in the center of the numerous nearby islands. It is surrounded by tall stone walls that act as a natural barrier. This is Uzushiogakure. In the lower center of the wall is a huge gate. As Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Mito approached the gate, the two Sannin observed that a highly intricate security seal was in place to keep outsiders from opening it. As he examined the seal, Jiraiya exclaimed in amazement, "This is an incredible protection seal. I've never seen so many layers of protection." Although he was a seal master by Konoha standards, this level of fuinjutsu was far above his level. This is the key to the village, and on this scroll is the method to unlock each layer of the seal that has been ordered specifically to match the seal on the village gate. Mito grinned as she responded, "By overlapping so many seals to complement each other, it is no longer a protection seal, and it is a lock." Mito put the scroll on the ground while adding some chakra to it. The scroll's seal began to separate from the paper, then gradually moved and affixed itself to the gate's seal. Like a lock and a key, the two seals started to overlap and fit perfectly. The gate slowly opened itself as the whole thing started to glow blue. Tsunade and Jiraiya tried to look into the village as they waited tensely for the gate to open. When the two Sannin saw the condition of the village, they were taken aback. Fully blossomed sakura trees and other plant life adorned most of the area, and all the ruins that should have been scattered around it were removed. The area's outer rim was dotted with farmlands and cattle's drives, and in the center of the village stood a structure that resembled the Senju clan compound almost exactly. The main residence consists of a two-story Japanese-style complex painted a light brown color. At every corner of the compound are a number of smaller homes built in a similar style. The compound's yard was covered with a beautifully designed pond. The water was crystal clear and teeming with koi fish, which caused the water to dance with a variety of colors. A stone bridge connected the two sides of the large pond, which was surrounded by sakura trees and flower beds. On the opposite side of the pond is a large gazebo. A stunned Tsunade exclaimed, "Wow, Ba-chan, how did you guys manage to do this by yourselves?" The few of us easily moved the ruins of the city various seals. We simply applied a large-scale storage seal to seal the rubble, then disposed of it. But before we did all that, we did salvage what we could in the remains of Uzu Shiogakure. In the end we managed to locate most of our jutsu. This compound was built using the resources from the ruins, and as you might have noticed, I designed it almost exactly like our home in Konoha. Jiraiya and Tsunade listened intently. We didn't know much about construction, so we casted a high-level genjutsu on some carpenters and construction workers to make them think that they are building this compound in Nami no Kuni, and hired them to build this compound. Finished Mito as the three of them entered the property. The compound was shown to Tsunade and Jiraiya, and despite its size, every available space was used effectively. Numerous training dojos were dispersed throughout the interior, and there was a large library with the Uzumaki scrolls. The location's overarching theme was traditional Japanese architecture. Since the compound was entirely constructed of wood, Mito chose not to have most of it painted in order to create a memento of her ex-husband, Hashirama. After arriving at the main living building, the three of them searched the rooms. The two Sanin selected one at the end of the hallway. With its own balcony, big windows, spacious closet, and bathroom, the room was big enough. To their delight, there was a lovely yellow crib with a soft little mattress on it and small animals sewn into it, in addition to a king-sized bed that was affixed to the back wall in the center of the room. Tsunade grinned and said, "Ba-chan, that is a lovely crib. I know our child would love it, thank you." "This is the second one I've made this year," Mito said, pleased that they liked the crib. "You're welcome, dear, I made the crib myself." Jiraiya recalled, "Oh, yes, I almost forgot, there's the Uzumaki heiress." "Yes, would you two like to see her?" The couple nodded with a smile, wanting to see the baby girl. Mito led them to her own room, which was almost exactly like their room. Also on the side of Mito's bed was a similar crib, only this one was red, with an overall feminine feel. Inside the crib was an adorable baby. She had beautiful shining violet eyes. Signs of Uzumaki red hair decorated her head. She was wearing a little pink whole body outfit that looked very cozy and warm. "Oh, Kushi-chan. You woke up already. You usually sleep much longer. You would like to meet our other guests as well." As Kushina giggled sweetly, Mito cooed. The Sanin thought, "She is beautiful," as she smiled down at the infant girl as Tsunade slowly made her way to the crib. "Ba-chan, may I hold her?" At her granddaughter, Mito nodded and said, "Of course you can, Su-chan." Mito nodded, and Tsunade scooped the girl into her arms. Kushina's expression of bewilderment made her look even cuter. "Hello Kushi-chan. Oh, you are so cute," Tsunade cooed as she rubbed her face against Kushina's. Jiraiya grinned as he walked over to his fiancée copyright and looked at the baby. He knew that Tsunade would make a wonderful mother. When Kushina looked up at Jiraiya, she started to giggle and reached for his white hair. Tsunade grinned as she gave the baby to Jiraiya, who happily accepted the little bundle. Kushina grabbed his hair as Jiraiya hugged her, already feeling a connection to the precious girl. After grinning at her granddaughter and grandson-in-law, Mito decided to voice her concerns. "Jiraiya, Tsunade," she said solemnly, causing the other two to turn to stare at her in interest. "As you are aware, Kushina's parents had already died, and I won't be able to care for her for very long at my advanced age. Is it possible for you two to adopt her as your daughter?" Although Tsunade and Jiraiya were aware that the girl's parents had passed away, they had never considered adopting her. Tsunade looked down at the adorable baby girl in her fiancée copyright's arms, feeling a connection to her immediately as she held her, and they were technique-related. She looked at Jiraiya in silence, seeking his opinion. When Jiraiya noticed the expression Tsunade gave him, he began to think about him. Kushina was still holding onto his body and grasping his hair, already falling asleep, and he smiled, saying, "I would love to have her as our daughter." He turned back to Tsunade and nodded, and the two turned back to Mito, both of them grinning from ear to ear. Mito grinned, so happy that Kushina would grow up with a whole family. Tsunade gazed down at her new daughter, Kushi-chan. Can you say Ka-chan? Kushina just chuckled and started to grab her new mom. 8 months of time skip. Tsunade was sitting on her room's balcony, holding Kushina to her chest as she breastfed her. Ever since she became pregnant, she started to produce breast milk, so ever since she adopted Kushina, she has been feeding her. Of course, Jiraiya remarked that she has enough to feed Kushina, their child, and occasionally him. It was a lovely morning at Uzu, with birds singing, winds blowing to the sakura leaves on the trees, and distant sounds of the waves adorned the morning air. She said cheerfully to her daughter, "You sure are hungry today, Kushi-chan." Instead of responding, Kushina simply gazed at her mother with her large, sparkling violet eyes, and if Tsunade wasn't in a comfortable position and wasn't 9 months pregnant, she would give the adorable girl a hug. The girl was the cutest baby, full of energy during the day and a sweet little angel at night. For Kushina, being a mother brought back memories of her younger brother's life. Nawaki wasn't much younger than her, but he was one of the most childish people she had ever met. He was essentially a big baby. The past 8 months have been the happiest days of Tsunade's life. She had assumed that living on this remote island would be dull, but it was actually quite the opposite. She and Mito would frequently spend time together cooking and training, and it was good to see her grandmother again. Tsunade had not been this close to nature in a long time. She had grown accustomed to the bustling streets of Konoha and the bloody battlefields of war. Tsunade's physical health had suffered during the pregnancy. She felt weaker and more tired than usual, but Jiraiya had been incredibly helpful and supportive during these months. He had also formally proposed to her by getting her a beautiful ring made at Mount Myobuku, and he had been incredibly handsome at their wedding ceremony, which had been the happiest time of her life, that is, the only people who mattered, aside from their sensei. With a guest room converted into a medical room and Tsunade due in a few days, she had already instructed Mito and Jiraiya on how to handle her contractions. "Su-chan, are you sure the morning wind wouldn't be harmful to the baby?" Tsunade asked as someone placed their chin on her head and wrapped their arms around her shoulders. "Jiraiya-kun, once again, I am the best medic in the world. I made sure to make my pregnancy to be as safe and healthy as possible," Tsunade said, laughing as she glanced over her shoulder to see her 6-month husband. She then kissed him. "Hey Kushi-chan, how is my princess doing today?" Jiraiya asked as he scooped his daughter from Tsunade, breaking the kiss to look down at his beloved daughter. Kushina saw her father and started chanting, "Da, da, da." Jiraiya would frequently play with Kushina, change her diapers, and give her baths. Over the past few months, Jiraiya had grown to love the little ball of energy. "Oh, she can almost say daddy," said an excited Jiraiya, while a slightly irritated Tsunade watched. As Jiraiya concealed a smirk from his wife, Tsunade complained, "She can't even pronounce ma." A few months ago, Tsunade decided to check the baby's gender, and the results showed that it was a boy. "Oh, don't worry, Naruto will probably say mommy first." Tsunade had lost a wager once more. Officially, their child was Senju Naruto. Tsunade was having a pleasant conversation when she suddenly felt something strange. When she looked down, she saw that her water had just broken. With wide eyes, Tsunade yelled, "Jiraiya! My water just broke," and seized her husband with haste. Jiraiya's eyes widened in amusement as he processed the situation. Jiraiya picked up Tsunade gently and said, "Oh my Kami, let's get to the medical room." He then made a kage bunshin to locate Mito and hurried to the medic room. As soon as they arrived at the medical room, Jiraiya placed Tsunade down while she started timing her breathing and contractions. As instructed by his wife, Jiraiya attacked Tsunade via intravenous IV, and started directing her breathing tempo. Mito was discovered in the garden by Jiraiya's kage bunshin, who informed her of the urgent situation. "What?" exclaimed the old lady. As she used shunshin to get there more quickly, Mito yelled, "Okay, then let's get going." As Tsunade prepared to expel her womb, Jiraiya and Mito were by her side. "Damn you, Jiraiya. You did this to me." Jiraiya is screaming in pain as his wife uses superhuman strength to crush his hand. He used chakra to strengthen his hand while stroking Tsunade's face and coaching her breathing. As Tsunade began to push the baby out, Mito was in front of her vagina. "Come on, Tsunade-chan, push." Tsunade exhaled, pushing each time, and the baby was finally emerging. Tsunade gritted her teeth in agony as she used up all of her remaining strength in a single push, and in an instant, Senju Naruto was born, landing straight into his great-grandmother's arms. "Come on, Tsunade-chan, the head is already out, just a few more seconds." Looking down at the newborn, Mito was ecstatic. Life was a true miracle. A wail of "Wah!" was followed by the appearance of a boy with stunning blue eyes. It would be an understatement to say that Jiraiya was thrilled. It was his first time seeing his own son, and he fell in love with the sobbing bundle right away. The boy was in good health. Mito saw that he weighed around 8 pounds and that, judging from his loud cries, he had a very strong set of lungs. Tsunade exhaled and said, let me see him. Mito brought Naruto to his mother, grinning, and wrapped him in a small blue blanket. The infant stopped crying and raised his large blue eyes to gaze at his mother just as Mito gave him to Tsunade. As Tsunade held her son close to her face and kissed his face a few times, tears of happiness were streaming down her cheeks. Jiraiya put his arm around his family while kneeling close to his wife and son. Thank you Tsunade-hime. He whispered in her ear as he gave her a tender kiss on the lips. Jiraiya waved it off by giving Tsunade and Naruto a tender embrace, clearly delighted that he now had a family of his own. Tsunade returned her husband's kiss and touched his battered hand with a regrettable expression. Mito, who was overjoyed that Tsunade had at last a happy family of her own, was also crying uncontrollably. She swiftly extracted a camera from a seal and snapped dozens of images of the new family. They ended up taking more than 100 photos, including each member of their small but content family. Additionally, a picture of a sleeping Naruto cuddling a sleeping Kushina in a crib served as the cover for their family album. Around the dinner table sat Tsunade, Jiraiya, Mito, and the 2 infants. Kushina was incredibly happy and energetic on her 1-year birthday, especially when she had to blow out the candle. Naruto had been born 6 months prior, and the 2 infants had been together ever since. The parents simply chose to place them in the same crib in Mito's room because Kushina would even start crying whenever Naruto wasn't by her side while they slept. Both Kushina and Naruto were seated next to each other in their own high chairs. They had just finished eating Kushina's birthday cake, and their cheeks were still covered in frosting. The 2 infants had nothing to do while the 3 adults ate and chatted. Naruto looked at Kushina and giggled as she reached over to poke him in the small face. He clapped his little hands together and said, hee hee hee, ba, ba, ba. Kushina prodded his face once more, framing her face with her now shoulder-length red hair. Naruto apparently took notice of Kushina's hair because he started to reach for it, fearing that Naruto would tug Kushina's hair. Tsunade was able to catch it and tried to stop him, but to her astonishment, Naruto grabbed her hair and started playing with it. Naruto, who had always thought the color red was very lovely, tangled Kushina's red hair around his little fingers. As she spoke, Tsunade grinned and said, "Ah, look at that. Naru-chan likes Kushi-chan's hair." The mother thought the scene was cute. When Jiraiya saw the scene, he couldn't help but be moved because he had never seen 2 babies so close to one another. At that age, babies typically lack the mental capacity to form friendships. Mito looked on with a hopeful expression from the sidelines. It would be like history repeating itself if the 2 infants, who were the heir and heiress of the Senju and Uzumaki clans, fell in love. It would be acceptable for them to get married even though they share parents because they are not blood relatives. Given that she and her spouse were also Uzumaki and Senju, it goes without saying that Mito was somewhat biased. Tsunade has also considered the idea on multiple occasions. She knows that 2 babies shouldn't behave that way because she is an expert in human behavior and the human body. She also knows a lot about human development. The 2 infants appeared to be closer to one another than to their parents, which is unusual for 2 babies of similar ages to act territorially toward one another when it comes to the parents' attention. Ha 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 ha, was Kushina's response as her hair moved, tickling her face. She prevented Naruto from tickling her face by grabbing his hands with her own small, plump fingers. Since she no longer wanted Naruto to tickle her, Kushina wouldn't let go of Naruto's hands as the 2 began to giggle. It didn't bother Naruto that Kushina was holding his hand. It was so warm that he yawned and started to feel drowsy. Seeing an opening, Mito got up to pick up Naruto and put him to bed, but before anyone could take him away, she made a cage bunshin to hold Kushina so she could carry both infants to bed while they were still holding hands. Tsunade had a faint idea of what her ba-chan was attempting to accomplish, while Jiraiya was completely unaware of Mito's intentions. She didn't say that she was opposed to Naruto and Kushina possibly dating in the future. In fact, she thought it would be fantastic if they did, with the Senju and Uzumaki clans joining together as the primary advantage. Mito held the 2 babies and said, "I'm going to put these 2 to bed first, it has been a long day for them." The married couple left the room as Mito began to walk up to her room. "Okay, thank you ba-chan, I think we will turn in too," said a lustful Jiraiya, attempting to speed up time so he can enjoy himself with his wife. Tsunade nodded at her husband's words, pleased that her ba-chan might use her own matchmaking plan, and eager for a long night with her husband. Upon reaching her room, Mito placed Naruto and Kushina in their crib and discovered that they were already asleep, both still holding each other's hand. Thinking this was very adorable and a positive sign, Mito started to take yet another ton of photos of her favorite subject. Mito was awakened from her beauty sleep by the joyful chirping of morning birds outside the compound, and she was shocked to discover that she had slept through the entire night. Normally, either Naruto or Kushina would wake her from their sobbing, so she got up and went to the baby's crib to see how they were doing. Knowing the scene would make a great picture, Mito started taking dozens of pictures so she could choose the best one. She was pleasantly surprised to see that Naruto and Kushina were still sleeping peacefully with small smiles on their faces, and of course, their hands were still connected. It also appeared that the two children had moved closer to each other in the middle of the night, so their foreheads were lightly touching. The voice of Tsunade jolted Mito out of her photo-taking trance, saying, "Hey Ba-chan," taking pictures again, with a hint of amusement. Mito softly murmured, "Oh, come over here, Su-chan. They look so cute right now," so as not to wake the cute couple. Tsunade looked more closely at her son and adopted daughter and couldn't help but smile at the beautiful sight. To test the waters, Tsunade said, "Ba-chan, if they are not babies, I might think that you are trying to get them to be together. Su-chan, as a medic of your caliber, you certainly see something different about those two. Normal babies wouldn't be this close to each other," said Mito while beaming at her two lovers. "They might share the same parents, but they are not real siblings, so there is nothing wrong if they are to love each other romantically. There is something different about these two, and I certainly would not mind if they were to date each other when they are older. But they are still babies. We are thinking at least 15 years ahead even if they are to develop romantic feelings with each other," Tsunade said, nodding in agreement with her Ba-chan's statement. Mito simply nodded her head, a little sad that she might not live long enough to witness the reunion of her two little darlings, but also aware that it would take a long time and that any pressure from her or the parents could backfire. After 5 years. In the remote seclusion of the new Uzashogakure, Jiraiya and Tsunade spent 5 years of peace, and it had been the happiest time of their lives. Two people were running around a training field with plenty of space around them. The sun shone warmly on the two kids playing tag with one another, and the birds were singing joyfully in the trees. The wind blew against the tree leaves, creating a gentle melody that added to the calm morning. It was a disconcerting fact that the two Sannin had not gone on any missions for the past 5 years, which had never happened since they became ninja. Jiraiya couldn't help but wonder about the situation of Konoha, considering that they were living in secret and that the only correspondence between Konoha and Uzu had been one letter every 3 months. Parenthood was treating the two Sannin quite well, and they were both thrilled to see their son and daughter grow and develop right in front of their eyes. The two Sannin were thoroughly enjoying their new life of peace and solitude, and they were overjoyed that they would no longer have to fight in any wars, despite Konoha's minor concerns. The elderly Uzumaki had known her late husband since she was a girl, and at the age of 8, their two clans were celebrating a great battle, and it was the first time Mito danced with a boy. Uzumaki Mito was also enjoying her incredibly long life with her family, and she was thrilled that she would be spending her last years with her little Naruto and Kushina. The young Senju and Uzumaki greatly reminded Mito of her own childhood with Hashirama. It was during a time of war and slaughter, so everyone was generally solemn and stressed all the time, but Hashirama had brought her inner happiness to the surface. Naruto's own happy personality reminded Mito of the Shodai Hokage, and she hoped that her little great-grandson would grow up to be a great person and ninja like his great-grandfather. At the time, the Kami no Shinobi was just a little boy, and his cheerful personality really made Mito happy. The blonde woman was smiling as she nestled closer to her lover's chest, resting into her husband's body as they sat in a couple of lawn chairs and watched their kids play together. The female Sannin laughed and remarked, "They sure are having a lot of fun." "Yeah, but they play tag every day. How are they not bored of it yet?" Jiraiya said, laughing and embracing his wife more tightly. Tsunade chuckled. "Who cares about that? They are running so much every day it is basically training them for their future shinobi arts." Kushina had grown a lot over the past 5 years. She was now about 3 feet tall, which was typical for a young child her age, and she had long red hair that reached down to her lower back. Kushina was a joyful, vivacious ball of sunshine who brought a lot of joy to her family. Her smile was so contagious that whenever she laughed or giggled, everyone around her, especially Naruto, smiled too. Both Jiraiya and Tsunade had brown eyes, but Naruto had a pair of bright blue eyes that will light up the area. He got them from his paternal grandmother, and Jiraiya loves them. The Senju heir had also grown a lot in his first 5 years of life. His hair was wild and spiky like his father, but it was blonde like his mother. The boy's hair had grown to shoulder length, with two twin bangs framing the Z's of his face, and he wore a small ponytail that was similar to his father's. As is typical of a boy his age, Naruto was an energetic and fun-loving child, just like Kushina, and the two had become best friends. Tsunade and Jiraiya had observed that Naruto and Kushina were not acting like siblings should, but rather as best friends. They had never been competitive for their parents' or great-grandmother's attention, nor had they ever been territorial toward one another. The two children would spend nearly every hour of the day together, almost like two pieces of a puzzle, completely inseparable. "Remember that you were supposed to catch me, Naru-kun. Come on," as she turned back to face the boy, Kushina exclaimed. Naruto grinned and said, "All right, Kushi-chan, here I am." As the son of two Sannin and a member of the renowned Senju clan, Naruto's natural talent was expected, but occasionally his parents felt that it was a bit over the top. Tsunade and Jiraiya wanted their children to have a fun and peaceful childhood, so they refrained from teaching Naruto and Kushina too much, but they were still surprised at what Naruto could already do, said the young boy as he ran as fast as he quickly caught up to Kushina. Jiraiya had taught his two children how to activate their chakra and some basic shurikenjutsu. Kushina had faced some typical challenges that most people face, but she had overcome them quickly. Naruto, on the other hand, was completely different. He essentially absorbed the lessons like a fish in water, required no practice or even a second attempt, and used his shuriken to strike all the intended targets. There was also his chakra, which Naruto will always remember and find amused at the faces his parents made when he first activated his chakra. Additionally, Naruto had an insane amount of chakra for a 4-year-old boy, already comparable to a senior genin. Naruto put his arms around Kushina and grinned, saying, "I caught you." As he gave his adopted sister a hug, the young boy exclaimed. Pulling her back against Naruto's chest, Kushina sulked. "Ah, you caught me again, Databane." She whimpered, crossing her arms. "I never beat you at anything." When the Senju boy heard Kushina's dejected voice, he frowned. "Hey, don't be sad, Kushi-chan." Naruto turned Kushina in his arms to face him, but she continued to frown. "Come on, Kushi-chan, smile," Naruto said with a sudden smile. As he abruptly tickled Kushina's sides, the boy exclaimed. As she attempted to wriggle out of Naruto's grasp, Kushina broke out in a string of giggles. "And Naru," she muttered, laughing and giggling. Stop," exclaimed the girl as she brushed Naruto's hands away and wrapped her arms around him to hold him in place. "That's cheating, Naru-kun." Gazing down into Kushina's violet eyes, Naruto was also laughing ferociously. "It doesn't matter. I made you laugh, didn't I?" Though she was in a different field than Naruto, Kushina was also a young child with talent. Like most Uzumakis her age, she had great talent in Fuinjutsu, and even Mito had recognized it. At the tender age of 5, Kushina already possessed the calligraphy skills of a fully grown person in addition to having very delicate and controlled chakra control, which she was much better at than Naruto. Mito had discovered that Kushina had a very special chakra, one that was not like anything he had ever seen. It was not particularly powerful or potent, but its tensile strength was incredible. If regular chakra behaved like strings when stretched, Kushina's acted like chains. Because of her unique chakra, Kushina was very skilled at using Fuinjutsu. The seals she made would be even more potent than usual. Tsunade had also noticed that Kushina's chakra could make her an excellent medic, primarily due to her nearly flawless chakra control. Jiraiya smiled as he approached his two kids and said, "Okay, settle down, kids." After removing her arms from Naruto, Kushina rushed to her father and exclaimed, "Hey Tu-chan." The girl joyfully cried as she leapt into her father's embrace. The Sannin kissed his daughter's cheek and said, "Hey Kushina-chan. Are you two ready for your training?" Jiraiya laughed and raised his daughter into his arms. "Of course we are, Tu-chan," Naruto said, grinning and nodding as he approached his father. "What are we learning today?" As Tsunade approached her husband and kids, she was beaming. That day, Jiraiya and Tsunade made the decision to formally begin teaching Naruto and Kushina specialized skills rather than basic ones. The two Sannin wondered why the Konoha Academy had to wait so long to teach the students such basic jutsus since the kids were 4 years old and had learned about them from their parents. They had essentially mastered them. Tsunade put her hands on her hips and began, "Today is different. Today is the start of a new 2 years training program." Confounded, Naruto said, 2 years? As Kushina listened in her father's arms, the boy asked. Jiraiya gave a nod. "Yes, starting today we are going to train the two of you in serious shinobi arts. And the two of you will choose what you want to learn." Putting her arm around her father's neck, Kushina said, "So we decide what we can learn." Tsunade gave her little girl a smile and a cheek kiss, saying, "Yes, darling, is there anything in particular you'd like to learn?" The two Sannin had been teaching their children the theory behind each shinobi art as well, and they wanted to see if the children could choose which field would be most helpful for them. Asked the kind mother, testing her children inwardly. Kushina cocked her head to the side and said, "I want to learn Fuinjutsu because I recall Ba-chan saying that my chakra will be very helpful for drawing seals. But I also want to learn medical ninjutsu from Ka-chan," the adorable girl chirped. Tsunade grinned at her young daughter and said, "Sure thing, sweetie." Looking down at his son, Jiraiya expressed his satisfaction that Kushina had made the right decisions. "What do you want to learn, Naruto?" As Naruto looked at his family, he crossed his arms and said, "I think I should learn offensive ninjutsu and taijutsu. I know I have large chakra reserves, so I want to take full advantage of that and become a combat ninja." He also mentioned how much he wanted to learn Ka-chan's superhuman strength because it is so amazing. As he laid Kushina on the ground beside Naruto, Jiraiya nodded and ruffled his son's hair. "Good, you both made some good choices. Okay then, starting tomorrow Naruto will be learning ninjutsu from me in the morning, and taijutsu with Ka-chan in the afternoon." The white-haired Sannin said to his son before turning to face his daughter, "Kushina-chan will be learning medical ninjutsu in the morning with Ka-chan, and Fuinjutsu with Ba-chan in the afternoon." Naruto and Kushina both nodded and smiled at one another. Hi. After 2 years. In the main training field of the second Senju compound, two shadows danced around, and a lot of fighting could be heard in the dust cloud that was created by all the high-speed movements. Jiraiya of the Sannin was one of the two fighting people in the area. He was in his 40s already, but he didn't look very old. Jiraiya and the other shadow were practicing taijutsu, and the Sannin was moving at a pace that would be difficult for most Chunin to keep up. Jiraiya parried another round of his son's punches and lectured him, "Not bad Naruto, but you must be more agile with your tight turns. Use your chakra to further enhance your grip to the ground." As his father directly blocked his punch, Naruto grunted and experienced some muscle soreness. "Hi to Chan." As he continued to attack his father with a barrage of quick punches and kicks, the Senju heir had to occasionally leap up to aim for his face because he was still much shorter than his father. Naruto was using the taijutsu form that his mother had taught him, a traditional Senju taijutsu that was taught to all members of the Senju clan in the past, and he had mastered it in the past year, which made his mother very proud of him. After sparring with his father for a few months, Naruto had started to notice that whenever he was about to create a blind spot, he would always brush the back of his hand close to his opponent's face. Naruto had tried to find any holes or flaws in his father's style, but as a Sannin, his father was too experienced to make any mistakes like that. Naruto noticed that his father was using his usual Kawazu Kumite, which really focused on creating a blind spot for the opponent and striking hard when unexpected. Jiraiya moved the back of his hand close to Naruto's face, and the younger fighter forced his own eyes to not follow the hand. Naruto then threw a hard punch at his father's midsection, and it connected. While he was about to strike, his fist was filled with chakra, and as soon as his punch made contact, he released all of that chakra at once, creating one of the superhuman punches that his mother had taught him to use. Naruto smiled as he watched his father's body vanish in a puff of white smoke, but Jiraiya's face twisted into a painful expression as he was flung backwards into a tree. The force was so great that his body broke through the tree and landed against a large boulder several meters later. Naruto pivoted and raised his fists in the air, exclaiming, "Yada!" The boy exclaimed, "I've finally vanquished one of Two-chan's Kage Bunshin." Jiraiya grinned at his son as he leapt from the tree he was standing on and said, "Well done, Gaki. Your taijutsu has really improved." As he tousled his son's hair, the father offered a compliment. As he gave his father the thumbs up, the Senju heir grinned and said, "Thank you to-chan. Ka-chan really worked me to the ground with her training." Naruto had grown significantly over the past 2 years, reaching Jiraiya's chest in height. His blonde hair was cut shorter, reaching only the top of his neck, but the sides of his face were still framed by his jaw-length bangs. Due to his intense training, Naruto had a fairly muscular build for his age, and he wore black combat pants and a mesh armor shirt. He also had a headband on his forehead that bore the Senju clan symbol. The Shodai Hokage had owned it before he founded Konoha, and Mito had always treasured it, so she chose to give it to Naruto as if transferring Hashirama's will to him. The Senju heir was a genius when it came to shinobi arts, and the two Sannin as well as Mito had recognized that, but he also had the determination and guts that made his father proud. Naruto had been learning the true skills of a shinobi from his parents for 2 years, and he had been doing very well. At the age of 7, Jiraiya could say that Naruto was strong, if not stronger than most of the Chunin in Konoha. Jiraiya had a great time training his son, and Naruto loved learning ninjutsu so much that it didn't even seem like training. The Gama Sennin was extremely proud of his son and couldn't help but believe that Naruto was, in fact, the child of prophecy he had been looking for all of his life. Naruto was better than all of the previous Sannin students, including the great Sharingan no Kakashi, who was supposed to be the ingenious son of the Shiroi Kiba and who graduated the academy at the age of 5. Then there were Nagato, Yahiko, and Konan, the 3 orphans Jiraiya had discovered in a megacure. They were all talented, but not particularly so. It was Nagato who had the most potential. Jiraiya had a lot of faith in the red-haired boy, primarily because he had the Fable Rinnegan, but the boy's timidity prevented him from reaching his full potential, and if Nagato was still alive, Jiraiya was willing to wager that Naruto would eventually surpass him in power. "Hey Two-chan, I'll see you at dinner later. I'm heading to the shower now." As he returned to the clan home using the Shunshin no Jutsu, the boy joyfully exclaimed. Jiraiya laughed at his young son and was filled with anticipation for Naruto's promising future as a Konoha shinobi. After taking off his sweaty, shabby clothes, Naruto jumped into his own shower. The boy was sore all over from training with his father, but his joy overcame the pain. He had been trying to defeat his father's Kage Bunshin for the past week, and he had finally succeeded. Naruto felt that all of his hard work was paying off, and he was getting stronger and stronger. Naruto had been training with his parents every day for the past 2 years in order to gain power, and 2 years ago he had promised himself that he would get stronger so that he could defend his precious people. Flashback on. The young Senju had always been interested in learning how to brew tea like his Ba-chan. He had no idea how she did it, but her tea was always divine. Naruto and his Ba-chan were enjoying a laid-back afternoon inside the house while sipping tea. "I adore your tea, Ba-chan. It's excellent." The boy gave his great-grandmother a cheeky smile and exclaimed. The elderly, compassionate woman said, "Thank you Naru-chan, you are such a sweet boy." Mito grinned and gave Naruto a head pat. "How has your training been going? Are you picking up a lot of knowledge from your Two-chan and Ka-chan?" Mito smiled and asked. Naruto nodded. "It's been going really well. I'm learning some really awesome things from Ka-chan and Two-chan. But some of the theory and meditation are a bit boring," said the youthful Senju heir, grinning. Putting an arm around her great-grandson's shoulders, the Uzumaki leader laughed and said, "Those things may be boring, but they will make you a smarter shinobi. Even your great-grandfather had to learn those things." The mention of Senju Hashirama made Naruto tense. He had always found his great-grandfather to be fascinating. Really, and it made Gigi stronger. As she reflected to her husband, the elderly woman said, "Of course it did. Ujiji was the most powerful shinobi of his time, and he had read every single book inside the Senju library. At first your Gigi was very childish and hated reading. But after he tried his first book, he couldn't stop until he finished all the books he could find, and it made him a very smart shinobi." Mito grinned at the youthful innocence of the child. Mito said, "Gigi is so cool, when I grow up I want to be just like him." Naruto grinned, delighted that his Gigi was such a strong shinobi. His Ba-chan said, "Your Gigi was a great man and shinobi, it is a good role model to look after." Mito laughed with laughter, but he was also filled with joy. "But do you know why your Gigi was so strong?" "No." The young Senju muttered, shaking his head. "Was it because of his really cool Mokuton jutsu?" Mito looked at her little Naruto and said, "No. Those jutsu did make your Gigi very strong, but what really made him stronger than all other ninja, was that he was training so he could protect the people precious to him. He always said, the true strength of a shinobi will only emerge when they are protecting someone precious to them." "Do you have someone really precious to you, Naru-chan?" Mito said, shaking her head. After a brief period of silence, Naruto broke into a broad smile and said, "Of course I do. Two-chan, Ka-chan, Kushi-chan, and Ba-chan are all very precious to me," the boy said. "Just like Gigi, I will train to become strong so I can protect all of you," Naruto said, turning back to face Mito with a more solemn expression. Mito sincerely hoped that Naruto would grow into an even better man than Hashirama since she could see that he shared her husband's will. End of the flashback. After taking a shower and drying himself off, Naruto reflected on his promise to his great-grandmother. Recalling that particular moment, he recalled that the first person that came to mind when Mito asked him about his precious people was Kushina. Naruto had been close to Kushina since he was a toddler. They share the strongest bond in the family, and she is Naruto's most valuable person. It was because of his feelings for Kushina that Naruto overcame all the difficulties of his training more quickly than he himself would have thought. He would never allow her to be hurt. Mito's words had altered Naruto's perspective on strength training. Instead of wanting to do cool things and show off, Naruto trains to become stronger so he could protect Kushina from any harm. After putting on a pair of dark blue jeans, a casual black mesh shirt, and black combat boots, Naruto began walking to the training hall where his mother trained Kushina. Since it was getting close to sunset, his Ka-chan should have finished training by now, and he hoped to see Kushina still using her medical jutsu training. Additionally, Kushina had advanced significantly since 2 years ago, having finished the majority of the basic Fuinjutsu training that Mito had provided her. Given that the Uzumaki seals were truly superior to all other forms, Kushina's proficiency with Fuinjutsu was already comparable to that of the majority of Konoha's Fuinjutsu specialists, and Mito was determined to teach her everything she knew about Uzumaki Fuinjutsu so that Kushina could continue to teach her children the knowledge of their lost clan. Kushina's naturally tuned chakra control made her a medical ninja with tremendous potential. Tsunade might even say that Kushina will be on par with Shizune in a few years. Kushina had also been hammering her with numerous books of medicine and herbs, and the young girl had committed all of her mother's lessons to memory. When Naruto entered the training hall, he smiled to see that Kushina was still practicing her Sha Senjutsu. The young Uzumaki had grown in the previous years, and she was only 2 inches shorter than Naruto. Her gorgeous red hair was kept at waist length, and she usually tied it in a single ponytail when she was healing something. Naruto usually went to Kushina for medical attention because she was competent enough to treat any kind of wound he could sustain from sparring with his mother and father. Kachiyose no Jutsu. Naruto whispered as he pressed his hand on the ground, and to his constant amusement, a small toad fell onto Kushina's head. Naruto smiled as he stood around a corner from Kushina, bit his thumb lightly, and rubbed blood on his palm while channeling chakra to his hand. A tick mark appeared on Kushina's forehead, and she snapped the pen she was holding. "How many times must I warn you not to do that?" Kushina turned around and gave Naruto a fierce look as she exclaimed. "I really don't know, I lost count a year ago," the Senju said, laughing when he saw Kushina's irate expression, primarily because the toad was still on her head. Naruto had been summoning a small toad on top of Kushina's head to annoy her ever since Jiraiya had allowed him to sign the contract for the toads. "Please stop playing like that, Naru-kun. It is getting really annoying," the Uzumaki girl said, glaring at Naruto as she lightly boinked the toad, sending it back with a puff of smoke. The girl waved her fist at the boy and cried out. With a laugh, Naruto approached Kushina and said, "I couldn't help it, but you always look so adorable when I do that." Naruto stood next to Kushina and watched as she channeled her chakra into the dead fishes, and a few seconds later, all of them began to move. Kushina blushed a little and gave Naruto a light slap on the chest. "Whatever, just don't do it when I am trying to finish my jutsu," the girl said before turning around to work on reviving 8 dead fishes at once. Kushina grinned and clapped her hands together in joy. She had been trying to increase the range of her Sha Senjutsu, and she succeeded. "Naru-kun, I succeeded," the girl grinned at Naruto and chirped. The boy grabbed Kushina's hand and said, "Good job, Kushi-chan. Let's go. I want to spend some time with you." Kushina simply followed her brother and best friend with a smile on her face, wanting to spend some time with him as well. Naruto loved it when Kushina smiled because it made him happy too. Naruto was leaning his back against the trunk of a big tree while perched on a tall branch. The young Senju was just taking a rest before returning inside for dinner after completing his daily training session with his father. Naruto had begun training under his mother in taijutsu and his father in ninjutsu 2 years prior, and it was almost time to decide on 2 more subjects to concentrate on. With a sigh, Naruto shut his eyes. As his body sagged further against the tree trunk, the man muttered to himself, "What should I choose?" Nato was still a young child, but after 2 years of parental training, he was practically as strong as the majority of chunin in Konoha. Tsunade was frequently taken aback by her son's unusually high level of skill. Although Orochimaru was regarded as one of Konoha's most gifted shinobi, Naruto's innate talent outshone even the former Sannin. With her taijutsu training, Tsunade had worn Naruto down to the ground. Occasionally, her son would even faint from exhaustion, but Naruto never once voiced any complaints. Through Naruto's eyes, the female Sannin could see how determined her son was to become as strong as possible. Due to his incredibly large chakra reserves, Naruto's chakra control was essentially non-existent at the beginning of the 2-year training program. However, after being pushed to the limit with chakra control exercises, he was nearly on par with Kushina. Naruto opened his eyes and fiddled with a leaf in his hands, whispering to himself, maybe I should try Fuinjutsu? Mito had previously trained Kushina in Fuinjutsu, and Naruto had found it to be quite fascinating, particularly when Kushina skillfully sealed a massive boulder into a small scroll. Naruto's desire to delve deeper into the domains of offensive ninjutsu and taijutsu is the only thing preventing him from doing so. He questioned whether he could simply repeat the courses and gain more knowledge about both disciplines. Something red caught the boy's attention as he was thinking. He turned to see a ripe apple dangling from a branch. Grinning, Naruto took it from the tree and took a joyful sniff. The Senju devoured the big apple in less than a minute after tasting it and discovering it was incredibly juicy and ripe. For some reason, there will always be some ripe fruit growing on the tree where Naruto chooses to relax, even if he has no idea why. However, he can never find any when he simply walks around looking for them. Naruto picked a green leaf from a branch and held it in front of his nose, muttering, I really like this tree. The young Senju would spend endless hours on a tree because she had always loved the outdoors. No matter how stressed he was, sitting in a tree always made him feel calm and relaxed. He didn't know why, but trees always had a strange way of calming him. While holding the leaf in his hand, Naruto channeled some chakra close to it. A moment later, an invisible wind blade sliced through the leaf. To the surprise of the Sannin, Jiraiya tested Naruto a few months ago for his natural chakra elements and found that his son was highly skilled in 3 of them: Futon, Suiten, and Doton. A child under the age of 10 would never experience such a phenomenon. It was truly miraculous. Jiraiya was only able to train Naruto on Doton and Suiten because he didn't know anything about Futon. Therefore, he got some wind manipulation scrolls from the Uzumaki library and had Naruto learn on his own. Although Futon was much more difficult to control than his other 2 elements, Naruto was still able to master it. Naruto was becoming accustomed to using Futon jutsus after training himself to the point where he could fight on the battlefield using his wind chakra. As he lay down fully on the wide branch, Naruto allowed his training to wander through his mind. He was a little worn out from all of his training and decided that a nap would be pleasant. His mind followed his eventual journey back to Konoha. He and Kushina had always been assured by their parents that they would return to Konoha and establish a new life there. Even though Naruto had studied Konoha extensively and had become eager to return to his native land, he still knew very little about it. Reading about the numerous struggles his ancestors had faced had taught the young Senju many valuable lessons, and he was aware that he had a lot to live up to. He was the descendant of the Nidaime Hokage Senju Tobirama and Senju Hashirama, the most formidable shinobi in history. In addition, his parents were regarded as 2 of the strongest shinobi still living in the modern era. Therefore, if Naruto truly wished to honor his family, he would have to outshine them all. Naruto, who was half asleep, muttered, this is so comfy. Naruto was content with his brief slumber. He could already feel his muscles relax and his chakra reserves reload. As the sun was setting, a gentle breeze blew through the area, creating the ideal temperature for a quick nap. But all of a sudden, Naruto felt a slimy substance touch his face. The Senju heir leapt from his slumber and wiped his face rapidly. When he looked down and saw the tiny slug crawling on his face, Naruto knew exactly what had happened. He boinked it on the head to send it back to its summoning world. When Naruto looked down to see Kushina laughing on the ground, gripping her stomach, and rolling around, his body was trembling from the repulsive sensation of having something so slimy crawl all over his face. Naruto wanted to be angry, but right now Kushina was simply too cute. The boy clapped his hands together after channeling some earth chakra into them. As the ground beneath Kushina abruptly rose up like a wall and projected the laughing girl into the air, Naruto whispered, Doton. Dorya, Heki. Kushina was still laughing wildly as she wriggled in her best friend's arms when Naruto leapt to the ground and grabbed her in his arms. After wiping a tear from her eye, Kushina turned to face Naruto. Amidst her laughter, the girl exclaimed, "Why you were so shocked? It was so funny." Naruto walked into his house with Kushina in his arms and muttered sarcastically, "Haha, yeah, it is so funny." The girl gave Naruto a victorious smirk while crossing her arms. Kushina nodded her head and said, "Now you understand how I feel when Gamakichi lands on my head out of the blue. Well, that was a lot more fun than I expected. I was just coming out here to tell you that dinner is ready." Naruto nodded and grinned down at the girl. He said, "Okay," before his expression became a little more solemn. "Hey Kushi-chan, have you decided what 2 subject you want to study for the next 2 years?" Kushina nodded, grinning. Yep, I am going to study taijutsu with Ka-chan, and learn more fuinjutsu from Ba-chan and Tu-chan. Laughed the youngster. What about you, Naru-kun? Before he grinned down at the girl, the Senju considered his options one final time. It was a difficult decision, but Naruto had already decided to continue learning offensive ninjutsu from Tu-chan and begin learning fuinjutsu from Ba-chan and Tu-chan. After a year, Naruto exclaimed, Sweden, Daibakufu no Jutsu. While standing atop a lake and using his chakra to raise himself above the water's surface. The water surged and rose to a height of several dozen meters as the jutsu spread a lot of water over a wide area. Then, like a massive waterfall, it poured down to the ground in a single, massive cascade. The jutsu had the strength to hollow out the earth and looked like a massive wave. What is left over after using that technique is reminiscent of the aftermath of a natural disaster, if nothing else. The water drained the lake of roughly a fourth of its initial volume and formed a massive crater in the ground. With the use of his chakra, the Senju leapt from the water's surface and hovered 50 feet above the ground. Naruto held a blade firmly in his hands and unsealed it after sealing it into his wrist. The blade of the Nodaichi was 4 feet long. It has a greater range and cutting power than a standard katana because it was heavier and more resilient. Since he stopped practicing taijutsu with Tsunade, Naruto had resorted to using a blade. Naruto started training himself in kenjutsu during his free time because his body was not getting as much exercise as it was used to after switching from taijutsu to fuinjutsu. Naruto was eager to learn the Nidaime Hokage's kenjutsu techniques from the scroll his mother had. At first, it was challenging because his great-grandfather's style was more centered on longer blades, like the Raijin, which could reach great lengths if enough chakra was directed through it. Naruto chose to switch the element to the futon chakra since he lacked a Raijin or Raiden chakra. By mastering the Hine no Jutsu, the Senju was able to direct his wind chakra into his blade, increasing its cutting power and range. To effectively use the Nidaime's style, Naruto needed to speed up a lot, so he had his father draw some weighted seals on his body to gradually make it heavier. As Naruto slashed his blade across the area in front of him and made an invisible blade of wind whip from his Nodaichi, he exclaimed, Fa, Tun. Kazikiri no Jutsu. And cut through a large tree trunk. A battle fan would typically use the Kazikiri no Jutsu, but Naruto integrated his mother's taijutsu techniques into his kenjutsu. Naruto can effectively launch an amplified version of the Kazikiri no Jutsu by pouring a significant amount of wind chakra into his blade prior to striking and releasing it all at once as he slashes. Naruto repeatedly slashed his blade before hurling several more blades of wind at the tree in front of him. With ease, the destructive blades cut through the wooden trunk, destroying several more trees behind it. After landing horizontally on one of the trees, the Senju boy launched himself toward the ground using the tree's trunk as a springboard. The Nodaichi was starting to glow a strong blue as Naruto poured a tremendous amount of chakra into his blade. Getsuga Tensho! Exclaimed Naruto as he simultaneously released his chakra and slashed his blade into the ground. The ground was torn in two by a huge tsunami of chakra that pierced it. As it completed its journey on the ground, the wave of pure chakra seemed unstoppable as it ripped through the lake. The attack only ceased when it struck the opposite side of the shore. A voice behind the Senju boy said, Naruto, do you really have to ruin the training field so much? Naruto turned to greet his father, grinning at his voice. Good morning Tu-chan, just warming up for training. Jiraiya returned the smile and approached his son, patting his shoulder and ruffling his hair. As he observed the destructive power of Naruto's Kazikiri no Jutsu, the man remarked, your kenjutsu is really getting good. No many people can pull off what you do with wind chakra. But your Getsuga Tensho technique. That is just amazing. If your Ka-chan knew that her taijutsu incorporated with kenjutsu would have that kind of effect, she would have taken to using a blade a long time ago. The boy nodded, grinning. Thanks to Chan. The boy grinned broadly. After he and his son walked to the middle of the field, the Sannin laughed. So, did you make any progress on the jutsu you were trying to create? When Naruto revealed that he was attempting to make his own ninjutsu, he shocked both his parents and great-grandmother. A typical Junin should find it extremely challenging to create an original jutsu, but if they thought Naruto could pull it off, they were pleasantly surprised. When Kushina learned that Naruto was creating his own jutsu, she became extremely excited and even forced him to swear to her that he would teach it to her once he was done. The boy from Senju nodded and grinned. I have been steadily making progress, and I predict that I will be finished with it soon. Jiraiya gave his son a proud smile. He didn't know what kind of jutsu Naruto was attempting to make because the boy wanted it to be a surprise, but whatever it was amazing that the 8-year-old could create an original jutsu. Naruto gave his father a smile. So Chan, what are you going to teach me today? The Sannin grinned broadly. That's the thing, Naruto, I came to tell you that we will skip training for today. Your mother and I have some news for the whole family. The Senju boy wanted to know. Wow, sounds important. Jiraiya nodded and laughed. The man grabbed his son's shoulder and used the Shunshin no Jutsu to make his way back to the house more quickly. Yes, it is important, he exclaimed. Tsunade, Mito, and Kushina were already seated along the couches in the main living room when Naruto and Jiraiya entered. When Tsunade saw her husband and son, she smiled and motioned for Jiraiya to take a seat beside her. Naruto sat down next to the younger Uzumaki girl after approaching Kushina and his Bachan. When Naruto took a seat next to her and scooted closer until their shoulders touched, Kushina grinned. Kushina whispered to Naruto, "Do you have any idea what this is about?" The boy from Senju shook his head. Naruto considered the situation and concluded, "I have no idea, but it must be important seeing that we are skipping training to hear this." As Tsunade got up and approached the two children, she grinned broadly at them. Jiraiya and Mito were already grinning a little. Both of them had no idea what they were going to be told, and Naruto noticed that Kushina was staring at him as well. Given how joyful everyone seemed to be, Naruto thought it was good news, but he was unable to make any assumptions because he had no idea what was happening. Tsunade knelt down in front of her daughter and son and put a hand on each of their shoulders. The woman gazed lovingly at her children and asked with glee, "You two must be wondering what we are going to tell you, right?" Kushina cocked her head slightly to the side and nodded. "Yeah, what's going on, Ka-chan?" Jiraiya stood up, went to his wife and kids, knelt beside Tsunade, and took her hand. The white-haired man's words, "We have some very good news, and I have a feeling that you both are going to be very happy," added to the unbearable tension that the two kids were already experiencing. Tsunade gave a collective clap of her hands. The female Sannin exclaimed, "You both are going to have a younger brother or sister," while Mito and Jiraiya grinned broadly. For a few seconds, neither Naruto nor Kushina spoke, and the latter was the first to respond. A smile crept onto Kushina's face as her eyes widened. Before jumping off the couch and stomping on the floor, Kushina raised her hands to cover her mouth. The ecstatic girl grinned at her parents and exclaimed, "You mean I'm going to be a big sister?" Despite the fact that Kushina was only a few months older than Naruto, the Senju heir had always been the older of the siblings because he typically looked after Kushina and behaved more like an older brother. Although Kushina had always complained to her mother that Naruto was treating her like a baby girl, she was thrilled to be an older sister in a few months. Tsunade and Jiraiya both nodded their heads in rapid succession as they laughed heartily at their daughter's response. The loving mother pulled her young daughter into a tight hug and exclaimed, "Yes, Kushi-chan, you are going to be a Oni-chan." She was happier than she had ever been. The two Sannin had been trying for a second child for some time. They were initially apprehensive because they thought their second child might be in danger like Naruto, but they were prepared to take the chance. Tsunade had stated once more that her child would be a lovely girl with brown eyes and white hair. The news made Naruto's heart ache. It was definitely cause for celebration. Before a huge smile spread across his face, the boy whispered to himself, "I'm going to be a brother again." Running to his parents, Naruto leapt to give his father a hug. "Yada!" exclaimed the little boy, who was not acting chunin but rather his own age. With a laugh, Jiraiya raised his son up on his shoulders. "You are going to be another Oni-chan, Naruto." Rising to her feet, Mito grinned at her granddaughter. The elderly woman hugged her beloved little girl, who would soon become a mother of 3, and said, "I am so happy for you, Su-chan." Tsunade gave her grandmother a hug in return, her smile brighter than ever. The woman said, "Thank you, Ba-chan," before releasing her embrace and turning to face Mito. The Sannin said, "Hey Ba-chan, we decided that if the baby is a girl, we will name her after you." Her husband nodded in agreement. Mito nodded, her eyes stinging from her own tears. As she embraced her loved ones, the Uzumaki and Senju leader muttered, "Okay. Thank you, Su-chan, Jiraiya-chan." She was thrilled to be able to see her third great-grandchild before she died. After 3 months, inside his home's main training field, Naruto was once again training as hard as he could, while the surrounding area was mostly demolished and battered. Along with man-toppled trees that appeared to have been ground into pieces, the ground was covered in craters of various sizes. At the center of the field, the Senju heir himself was gasping for air, exhausted, and nearly out of his enormous chakra reserves. Naruto was on the verge of mastering his first original jutsu and had been training non-stop for more than 5 hours. He didn't want to stop. Since learning that he was expecting a brother or sister, The Senju heir had become even more driven to train. A few months prior, his parents had warned him that, as the Senju heir, he was in danger in Konoha and that every other shinobi village was a threat. Because he was alone and learning how to protect himself from his enemies, Naruto was not particularly intimidated, but the boy started to worry about his younger siblings. He will be in the same predicament as Kushina and the soon-to-be baby, and Naruto was not going to allow anyone to hurt his priceless people. Naruto developed an idol for the legendary Shodai Hokage, who was also his great-grandfather, as a result of Mito's numerous stories about him. The youngest of Hashirama's two brothers, a notorious shinobi who rose to become the Nidaime Hokage, actually passed away when he was only a young boy. Even very young children were sent to fight in the numerous clan wars that took place during those gloomy times. The Senju clan was one of the most well-liked clans at the time. The Senju clan was already regarded as one of the most powerful clans prior to Senju Hashirama's rule, but the number of casualties was excessive. By founding Konohagakure no Sato alongside the Uchiha clan, the Shodai Hokage fulfilled his promise to himself and his clansmen that he would one day stabilize the clan and form an alliance with their worst enemy. The reason Naruto was training so hard was because he had made a promise to himself that, like his ancestor, he would risk his life for his loved ones. The Senju looked down at his own hand and saw that most of his palm was burned with chakra. It is still not good enough, Naruto swore, clenching his fists and dragging his feet. I need to push the power and rotation to its maximum. With a sigh, Naruto concluded that he needed to take a brief respite because he was overstressing himself. The boy approached an intact tree and leapt to the top of the remaining branch. Even though Naruto was exhausted, it would be a shame to stop since he was so close to mastering his jutsu. In an attempt to calm his body and soothe his circulatory system, the Senju distributed his chakra throughout his body. A green glow emanated from the boy's palm as he raised his hand to his face and channeled chakra into it, gradually healing the burns on his hand. Naruto put his other hand on the tree trunk and unconsciously channeled some chakra to the tree because it hurt even while he was healing his burns. The boy closed his eyes and did his best to ignore the searing pain on his hand. After 5 agonizing moments, he sighed in relief and opened his eyes. When his vision returned, however, the first thing he saw was a strange-looking fruit hanging from one of the tree's branches. Even in the herbal textbook his mother had made him read, Naruto had never seen a fruit like this. It glowed a gentle blue and was as large as an apple, but perfectly round. It appeared extremely soft and seemed to be pulsing with some kind of energy. Naruto noticed that the tree appeared much healthier than it had a few minutes before, and that there was only one fruit on the whole tree. Naruto muttered, "That thing looks really good," as he reached out and picked the strange-looking fruit off the tree. He held it up to his nose and sniffed it. It smelled divine and unlike anything he had ever smelled. Despite the fact that it was a bad idea, Naruto took a bite out of the fruit because his curiosity overcame his sense of caution. When the juices touched Naruto's tongue, his eyes widened because it was the most incredible taste he had ever experienced in his life. It was refreshing and sweet, and it had a mint leaf-like effect on his throat and mouth. "Oishi," Naruto murmured, glancing down at the fruit. Surprisingly, there was no seed in the center of the fruit, and he noticed that the insides also had a faint glowing blue that reminded him of chakra. Prior to taking another bite of the incredible fruit, Naruto pondered, what the? How did this thing grow if there was no seed on the branch? He soon finished the entire thing. Man! That was the most amazing food I have ever tasted. If I find any more I should bring some back for Kushi-chan to try. After concluding that he had had enough sleep, the Senju heir leapt from the branch and hit the ground, but he experienced an odd sensation. He could feel that his chakra reserves were nearly full, and his chakra felt even more dense than usual, even though a few minutes of rest and some light healing wouldn't have significantly restored it. Reflecting on the fruit he had just consumed, the boy asked himself, what the? Could it be that fruit replenished my chakra? He turned to face the tree, which was obviously the healthiest of all those in its immediate vicinity. It was the only tree with green leaves, a full canopy, and thick, brown bark that appeared to be in excellent health. Shaking his head, Naruto made the decision to concentrate on his current task. He released his chakra through his palm after focusing it once more. Naruto created a tiny storm of chakra in the shape of a circle by using his chakra control to make his chakra spin in all directions in his hand. Gritting his teeth, Naruto poured more chakra into his jutsu while keeping the circle's shape. As he did so, the chakra grew denser and faster while spinning more quickly. Since the jutsu should be self-sustaining once it reaches a certain stage, the Senju could see that it was stabilizing and getting easier to keep its form. With a final thrust of chakra into his jutsu, Naruto gritted his teeth and finished it. Naruto's hand held a dense ball of chakra, which was enormous. In spite of its violent creation, the jutsu itself was strangely silent and radiated a blue glow of chakra. Smirking, Naruto bowed his knees, concentrated his chakra, and leapt into the air. In order to descend more quickly, he sent a burst of chakra through his feet and pulled his hand back as he reached the top of his height. Naruto thrust his hand forward, aiming his new jutsu at the ground as it drew closer and closer. Naruto thrust his arm fully out in the final seconds of his demise, causing the jutsu to crash into the ground. Rasengan. The impact was immediate. The earth surrounding the impact point was ripped apart, and the impact point itself was instantly reduced to rubble. Naruto felt as though he was tearing the earth with a hot knife through butter, and all he could hear was his chakra grinding against the ground's charred surface. As it was pushed into the ground, the Rasengan held its shape and refused to yield to the obstacles in its path. Because of the Rasengan's immense power, the ground beneath Naruto was trembling and fracturing. Naruto gave his jutsu a final shove and pushed it out of shape, grinning at its unadulterated power. A massive chakra explosion blasted into the ground below. When Naruto decides to finish the jutsu, he can control the direction of the explosion because he designed it to rotate. Naruto was seen pressing his hand against the top of the burning chakra dome that rose from the ground. He was still pushing it down. When the chakra finally dispersed, which took another 30 seconds, a crater that was at least 15 feet wide and 10 feet deep was visible. With a smile on his face, Naruto touched down on the crater's edge, having at last finished his original jutsu after a full year of practice. Naruto turned to see his entire family gaping at him from the edge of the training field, their eyes wide. When Jiraiya and Tsunade felt a sudden surge of chakra from the training field while they were watching Kushina train with Mito in Fuinjutsu, they swiftly used Shunshin to travel over and observe what was going on. When the entire Senju Uzumaki family witnessed Naruto's jutsu being destroyed, they were completely taken aback. They couldn't comprehend that a boy as young as 9 could have developed a jutsu that could be considered an A-ranked jutsu in Konoha. After giving his family a smile, Naruto leapt into the air and extended his arms. "Yada!" the boy exclaimed. "I did it." Kushina was back on the sidelines, staring at the jutsu. She could wait for Naruto to teach her how to use it. However, they were all far more serious for the seniors and adults. At first, they had some reservations about Naruto making his own jutsu, but after seeing what he could accomplish on his own, they had no more reservations about the youngster. Rather, they think Naruto will be able to outshine them both in terms of shinobi skills and possibly even surpass the Shodai Hokage. It was finally time to welcome the newest member of the Senju family into the world, 8 months after Tsunade and Jiraiya had informed their family about their pregnancy. Jiraiya was just as anxious as he had been when Naruto was born before, but fortunately for Tsunade, Kushina was competent enough to keep an eye on her condition without the white-haired Sanin's assistance. Tsunade was thrilled to learn a few weeks ago that her second child would be a girl, and Jiraiya had made a joke about his wife winning a bet for the first time in her life. In addition to being delighted that the child would bear her name, Mito was also relieved that another Senju family member would be born before her passing. Outside the medical room where Tsunade was giving birth, Naruto was watching his father walk down the corridor. Inside the room, Mito and Kushina were helping the female Sanin give birth to their newest family member. While Kushina was busy keeping an eye on her mother's physical condition to ensure she didn't overdo it, the elderly Uzumaki was holding Tsunade's hand as she grunted in pain from her contractions. Naruto's eyebrows twitched as he muttered, "To-chan, you really have to relax. You are making me even more nervous." Since the previous week, the white-haired Sanin had been the most anxious member of the family. He was always worried about Tsunade's whereabouts and even attempted to hide out and sleep in a different room from his wife in case he happened to run into her in the middle of the night, but Tsunade had calmed him down. Since it was strange to watch their typically humorous and affectionate father behave so cowardly, Kushina and Naruto found great amusement in their father's nervousness. Leaning against the wall beside his son, Jiraiya scratched his head. The father of 3 shuffled his feet along the floor and asked, "Is it supposed to take this long? I remember it being faster." The Senju heir was also anxious because, according to what he had been told by Kushina, their mother was too middle-aged to be having children, so there was a higher chance that she would give birth. If his mother were a regular person, Naruto would be afraid, but since she was a legendary Sanin and the most highly trained medical ninja in the world, he was confident she would be alright. The idea of having a sister made Naruto happy, and he was eager to meet the little girl. She would be significantly younger than them, so it would be different from Kushina. Naruto viewed Kushina more as a best friend than a sister, and he was aware of her strength and that he wouldn't need to constantly shield her like a child. Nevertheless, he would still do everything in his power to keep his beloved Kushi-chan safe, but things would be different with his youngest sister. Given that she was the daughter of two Sannin and one of the Senju clan's heiresses, Naruto, who will be 9 years older than his younger sister, will ensure that she is safe from any threats. As they waited for the door to open, the father and son fell into an awkward silence. However, one sound snapped them out of their reverie and caused them to smile broadly. It was the baby girl's cries. The room's door flew open, and Kushina emerged grinning at her brother and father. The girl joyfully exclaimed, "Mitochan is born," and clapped her hands together. Kushina exclaimed, "She is a healthy 8 pounds girl," as she vaulted into Naruto's embrace and allowed the young man to spin her around in celebration. The male Sannin's eyes began to water when Jiraiya burst into the room and saw his wife and Mito holding a crying infant girl near them. In the end, he had another daughter with whom he could share his love, and he loved all of his children equally. He approached his beaming spouse and grasped her hand. The man leaned down to give his wife a gentle kiss on the lips and a tight embrace, saying, "Thank you Tsunade-chan. I love you." Tsunade grinned at Jiraiya and tightened her hold on his hand. As she raised her infant and presented her to her husband, the woman whispered, "Hey, this is our second daughter. Senju Mito." With steady hands, Jiraiya grabbed his youngest daughter and held her close to his chest. When she saw her father grinning down at her, the girl stopped crying and started to fall asleep. In the brief moments that Jiraiya spent with his daughter, he could see that she had her mother's light brown eyes and that she was starting to show a very light shade of hair that would eventually turn white like his own. Gazing back, Jiraiya grinned at his other two kids. The man approached them with a smile and said, "Hey Naruto, Kushina. This is your little sister, Mito-chan." As she gazed down at the adorable child, Kushina was beaming as brightly as the sun. The child was so gorgeous that Kushina fell in love with her right away. After lightly rubbing her finger across her baby sister's soft cheek, the red-haired girl giggled when the baby opened her eyes. "Hey Mito-chan, I am your Oni-chan." Mito's big brown eyes met Kushina's, and she giggled a little as she put her little arms up and put her budgie finger around Kushina's. "Ah, you are just adorable Mito-chan." Naruto gave his father a smile. "Hey Tu-chan, can I hold her?" Jiraiya nodded and returned the smile. When he handed his new daughter over to his son, the man said, "Of course Naruto." For the first time, the Senju heir took his younger sister into his arms and held her close to his chest. Despite being a healthy 8-pound girl, Naruto immediately fell in love with the little girl. A small giggle escaped Mito's lips as the young girl's innocent eyes met her older brother's. Despite being full-blooded siblings, the two had very different features. The young girl's brown eyes and white hair stood in stark contrast to Naruto's blue eyes and blonde hair, but both shared some characteristics with their parents. As Kushina approached him and grinned down at the girl, the young man said softly, "Hey Mito-chan. I'm your Oni-chan." Naruto uttered the childish slur, "You are really cute Mito-chan," in a way that made both of his sisters laugh. Like she did with Kushina, the baby reached for the young man's finger after he tickled her face. She had a fairly firm grip for a small child. Kushina held out her hands and gave Naruto a shove. The young woman reached out to hold her baby sister and said, "Let me hold her Naru-kun." When he noticed the sparkle in Kushina's eyes, Naruto grinned and gave her the little bundle. Kushina held Mito close to her face and cooed, "Oh." The red-haired girl cheerfully exclaimed, "You are so cute Mito-chan." With a broad smile. When the Senju heir saw Kushina and the infant, he was thrilled because he believed Kushina had never looked so beautiful. Naruto followed Kushina while glancing over her shoulder at the infant. While Kushina was laughing at the adorable interactions between Naruto and the baby, he began to make silly faces and wave his hands aside from his ears to get the baby girl to laugh. Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Mito were all staring at them when Kushina unconsciously leaned back against Naruto, resting her side against his chest. She grinned as she held the infant and looked up at him. The scene in which Kushina and Naruto held the infant together was unexpected to the three-seasoned ninja. For a brief moment, it seemed as though they were the actual family of Kushina and Naruto were the parents, and little Mito was their daughter. Although it was strange for the parents to watch their kids act like a couple, Jiraiya and Tsunade both felt that Naruto and Kushina looked like the ideal couple at that moment, which gave them hope that there might be a chance in the future. Although Mito had always hoped that Naruto and Kushina would eventually start dating, in recent years, that hope had waned. Even though they were still kids and would only eventually get together when they were in their mid-teens, Mito chose to put the idea out of her mind and concentrate on their development. However, seeing them all together as a family with little Mitochan reminded her of her dreams. The idea that the final surviving members of the Senju and Uzumaki clans would fall in love was poetic. Mito, for one, would be overjoyed if that came to pass. As she watched Naruto and Kushina play with the infant, Tsunade sat up from her bed and leaned her body against her husband. The mother vaguely referred to them as three siblings or simply as Naruto and Kushina at the same time when she said, "They look so great together. So cute." Jiraiya was unsure of how to feel about the idea of Naruto and Kushina falling in love because he considered them to be his son and daughter. It should be alright because they had no blood ties, but he would still need to come to terms with the fact. Even at such young ages, Jiraiya had always observed that Naruto and Kushina were strangely similar to one another as siblings. Not even Konan and Yahiko were as close as Kushina and Naruto, which is saying something, he recalled from the Third Ninja World War. "Yeah," the man said softly as he carried on thinking. Mito grinned as he turned to face the two Sannin. To avoid being overheard by the kids, the elderly woman whispered, "I know what the two of you are thinking." As she looked at the beautiful image of Naruto and Kushina, Mito remarked, "I agree with you too. It may seem odd that a pair of children who grew up together as siblings might eventually become romantically involved, but when I look at Naruto-chan and Kushina-chan, I see that they would be perfect for each other." Surprised, Tsunade and Jiraiya turned to face their elder. Tsunade whispered, "Ba-chan." Mito nodded and grinned. As she turned to face the two contented kids, the Uzumaki leader remarked, "Just look at them. They clearly love each other already. I don't know if it is still love between siblings, but I am confident that it will eventually turn into romantic love." Naruto and Kushina were still playing with the infant when the two Sannin turned to face them. Even though little Mito-chan was still the center of attention, Naruto and Kushina would constantly glance at one another without realizing it, as if to check if they were still drawing attention to one another. As if to demonstrate to Naruto how attractive she was, Kushina appeared to be trying to make Mito look as adorable as possible. Naruto appeared to be doing the same to Kushina, with the exception that he was attempting to make Mito-chan laugh as joyfully as he could. With a sigh, Mito took a seat on the bed's edge. "They remind me so much of Hashirama-kun and myself." As they watched the two children play with the infant, the two adults and one senior kept thinking about what would happen if Naruto and Kushina were to eventually get married. Back in Konoha, Tsunade could already picture little red-haired boys and blonde-haired girls running around the Senju compound, and she grinned at the thought of having such cute grandchildren. As he glanced at Naruto and Kushina, Jiraiya smiled slightly. He would be content if the two were to end up together. He would permit them to do anything they desire as long as they are in love with one another. The family did not adopt Kushina. Instead, they loved and cared for her as if she were their own. Jiraiya would only trust Naruto to look after his little girl. Even though Uzushio was a small island, it felt very alien to the family of 6 who lived there. The Senju Uzumaki compound, which Mito had built over the years, was located in the middle of the island and took up around a fifth of the island's total area. The island's numerous training grounds were encircled by a thick forest on its outskirts, which was a fertile area. Growing a batch of ghost orchids on the island was a task Kushina was struggling to complete, despite her mother having given her charge. In the hopes that it would grow, Kushina had cleared out a section of the training field and sowed some seeds, but she kept getting let down. The girl tried everything she could think of, including fertilizing the soil, watering the plants on a strict schedule, and making sure there were enough insects in the soil, but the ghost orchids simply wouldn't grow. The red-haired girl was sitting with a pout on her face in front of her little garden. "Stupid orchids, why won't you grow?" The leaf of a ghost orchid is one of the materials Tsunade needed to make a new type of painkilling pill that could be used in combat, but she was unable to obtain any from the nearby islands. In one of her letters home, the Sannin requested that the Sandaime Hokage send her a pack of ghost orchid seeds, which she would then cultivate on the island. The Sannin delegated the work to her daughter because she was preoccupied with the other material. With her chin resting on her knees, Kushina was jabbing a thin branch into the ground. The girl half split the twig and muttered, "Why did Ka-chan give me such an annoying job? This is so stupid." Trying to come up with new ways to grow the plant had taken up most of Kushina's recent days, and it was starting to affect her mentally. When the girl felt someone sit down next to her, she decided to stop having a tantrum. Naruto smiled broadly and said, "Hey Kushi-chan, what are you doing?" After seeing Naruto's joyful face, Kushina actually felt better and smiled back at him. I'm still trying to get these things to grow, it's been over a month and they are not showing any signs of growth. The girl replied with a sigh. The girl screamed in frustration, "Ah!" before he put her head on Naruto's shoulder and her side on him. I am so sick of these flowers. With a laugh, Naruto put an arm around Kushina. Relax a little, you will feel better after you take your mind off it for a while. The girl with the red hair looked up at Naruto and winked while nodding. The girl joyfully exclaimed, "Okay, you can take care of this for me today, Naru-kun." The Senju boy nodded and laughed once more. After a week of intense training and sparring with his father, Naruto was taking a day off to avoid overstressing himself. Sure, I have nothing to do today anyway, we can do this together. The two young ninja made the decision to begin the process anew in the hopes of fixing any issues that may have arisen. In the hopes that the soil would be better there, Naruto picked a location that was quite a distance from the one where Kushina had originally decided to grow the flowers. It was still safe to conduct some trial and error tests because there was still a pack of seeds left. With a slash of his blade and wind chakra, Naruto removed the top layer of grass and soil, then used his Doden chakra to mix the soil evenly. Kushina dug a tiny hole in the middle of the tiny garden and always dug the others a foot from the first. 20 holes were created in the garden in a matter of minutes, and a ghost orchid seed was planted in each. After countless hours of intense training, Naruto enjoyed the light gardening and was happy to spend time with his Kushi-chan. Naruto clapped his hands together to remove the dirt from his palms and said, "Okay, that should be good for now." Kushina put her hands on her hips and nodded. "Yep, all we can do now is wait a few days and see if they grow." Naruto approached Kushina and took her hand. After using Shunshin to get him and Kushina onto a nearby large tree that overlooked their tiny garden, the boy said, "Let's go sit over there, it's a relaxing afternoon and I want to sleep on a tree." Naruto sat down against the tree's trunk and closed his eyes. The girl put her head on Naruto's shoulder and sat down beside him in the shade. As she relished the cool shade and the gentle breeze through the leaves, the girl muttered, "I really don't usually sleep on trees, but I can see why you like to so much." Naruto opened his eyes and saw Kushina's head resting on top of him. "I don't really know why either," he said. "I've always loved the forest and nature. I find it really relaxing and serene." Kushina put her arms around his shoulder and gave him a gentle nod. As she closed her eyes and felt her body completely relax against Naruto's, the girl remarked, "I find it really relaxing now too. I am getting a little sleepy. Naru-kun." Glancing sideways, Naruto noticed that Kushina was already half asleep. Grinning, he laid his head on Kushina's and fell into a sound sleep as well. It was good to have her by his side while he was so in tune with nature, as Kushina had never spent time with him while he was perched on a tree before. Naruto never really understood why, but whenever Kushina was with him, he felt much better than he did without her, regardless of the circumstance or location. Naruto believed that everyone felt the same way he did about Kushina to all of their friends when he was younger and only starting to read about human relationships and behavior, but he quickly discovered that he was mistaken. He discovered that his feelings for Kushina were stronger than his feelings for his parents, Ba-chan and Mito-chan. The Senju then assumed that he saw Kushina as his sister and loved her because he was family. Naruto fell asleep as he thought about how he felt about Kushina. Dream. It was the Senju compound's kitchen, a location that Naruto and Kushina were quite familiar with. It was close to sunset when the window was opened, and the interior of the house was tinted orange. A pot of boiling soup was steaming on top of the stove, which was on. The red signal light was flashing, indicating to whoever was cooking that dinner was ready to be served, and it looked as though whatever was cooking in the oven was done. The house's front door opened, revealing a tall man at the entrance, just down the hallway from the kitchen. Two bangs framed the sides of his face, and his full head of blonde, spiky hair reached the top of his neck. He removed his boots and entered the hallway, his blue eyes dancing around the space of his house. The man had a Konoha Hittite on his forehead and was dressed in a typical Konoha Junin uniform. He was grinning when he entered the kitchen and saw his lovely wife. The man grinned and said, "Kushi-chan. I'm home." One of the women was standing around the counter, grinning, watching her husband enter through the door. The young lady was a sight to behold. Her body was a man's dream, her face could only be described as angelic, and her long, silky red hair reached her lower back like a river of roses. She was dressed in tight blue jeans that showed off her toned and long legs to her husband, a pink t-shirt that hugged her body, and a frilly apron. The woman ran up to embrace her husband after returning his smile. "Welcome home, Naruto." Naruto returned his devoted wife's hug and inhaled her lovely aroma. With a calming sigh, the Senju leader said, "I apologize for taking so long on this mission, Kushi-chan, but it was more difficult than we originally thought." "Were you worried?" Kushina brushed her husband's cheek and withdrew slightly from their embrace. With a faint smile, the young woman whispered, "Of course I was worried, you baka. But I know my strong Naruto will come back to me no matter what." Kushina's chin was gently raised by Naruto, who then bent down to give her a passionate kiss. The man was going to savor her sweet taste once more because he had missed his wife due to his mission. By grabbing Kushina by the small of her back, Naruto drew her closer to him and intensified their kiss. Naruto licked his wife's lower lips and grinned against them when they parted for him, as he had done numerous times before. The Senju rubbed his tongue along his wife's swirling tongue and slithered it inside her warm, tender mouth. After putting her arms around Naruto's neck and drawing him closer to her lips, Kushina groaned into the kiss. The young woman kept massaging her husband's tongue with her own while pressing her chest against him. After a few minutes, the couple stopped kissing and exchanged affectionate smiles. Naruto gently stroked Kushina's face and brushed her hair behind her ear. "I love you so much, Kushi-chan." The woman with the red hair returned his smile and pressed his hand to her face. "I love you too, Naruto, more than anything." Dream termination. As Naruto's eyes gradually opened from the most wonderful dream of his life, he was still able to sense the joy he was experiencing. The boy blushed because, even in a dream, he had never thought he would do such a thing with Kushina. Since Senju Kushina was his sister, he should have been disgusted by the idea of giving her such a passionate kiss, but instead, Naruto felt thrilled at the prospect of kissing the person he values most in the world. The dream was so real that he could still feel Kushina's lips on his own, as if it had truly happened. While Kushina was still hugging his arm and resting on his shoulder, the young Senju noticed that her eyes were slowly opening. Kushina looked up as soon as she woke up and compared her violet eyes to the azure blue eyes she had loved since she first saw them. With their faces so close to one another, Kushina's face flushed as she glanced up at Naruto. He smiled and said, "Hey Kushi-chan, how did you sleep?" The girl from Uzumaki nodded and returned a tiny smile. She said softly, "I slept great. I had a great dream." The memory of his dream made Naruto flush, and he pondered whether Kushina had a dream like his. While standing and holding Kushina's hand, Naruto remarked, "We should go back home now, it's almost time for dinner." Nodding, the red-haired girl followed Naruto's example as they leapt from the tree together. Kushina grinned at her brother and said, "Sure, I have to tell Ka-chan about replanting the seeds anyway." She was already feeling normal after her brief nap. Naruto noticed that he had left his jacket on the ground when he turned to face the garden. The boy smiled and leapt back towards the garden, saying, "Hey, you go back first, Kushi-chan, I have to go grab my jacket." Kushina nodded and went back to their house because she was still feeling a little weird from her dream. Naruto was kneeling on the ground, attempting to understand why he was thinking of Kushina in this manner, even though it had taken him less than a few seconds to get to the garden and retrieve his jacket. Although he was well aware that Kushina was the object of his greatest love, he should not be romantically involved with her because she was his sister. After shaking his head to get his thoughts straight, the Senju chose to simply ignore the odd idea and walk away. Naruto leapt out of the area quickly and made his way back to his house, his chakra pulsing to his feet. However, he was unaware that the seeds he and Kushina had just planted a few hours prior were being impacted by his residual chakra.
This was it for today. To watch next part, subscribe to my channel and turn on the bell notifications so you never miss an upload. Till then, see you next time.